of the night with eyes of red. Vampires in the alleys where good men dread. Wolfmen howling beneath the pale moon. But justice is coming and coming soon. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us, secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. Cryptids themselves, yet they stand tall against the darkness, answering the call for every lost soul, every whispered prayer. They fight for the light in the midnight air. Dark haze. The night is young, the hunt begins. For against the darkness where hope never ends.
Good evening, folks, and thank you guys for joining us once again for the Nightmare Hunters podcast. I'm your host, DARoberts, and as always, I'm joined by my brother from another mother, Robbie Jed Rains. Doc couldn't be with us tonight because he is in Maine teaching a class, but he sends his regards. And, of course, Steve has to work on Wednesday night, so hopefully we'll be able to get scheduled eventually where he can join us tonight, join us on Wednesday nights. But it's good to have you guys here with us tonight because we have got a really heck of a show lined up for you. But before we jump into the deep woods and hollows, I want to take a moment for you guys, our community. You guys are the ones that make this show what it is, and without you, we wouldn't have one. So if you got a prayer request for yourself, for your family, for a friend, or someone that's just going through a hard time, let us know, because around here, we pray for each other, and I want to always continue that. And we got a few folks on the list this week. I know a couple folks that are in the hospital. Harold's been having some issues. Another friend of mine that I'll say an unspoken request for a friend of mine that's in the hospital. And say a prayer for Robbie. His daughter's about to get hitched, so he's fixing to have his hands full. And Doc's traveling, so say a prayer for Doc and for Miss Lene as well. But folks, before we get started, I wanted to turn around and ask my co-host here, Mr. Robbie Jed Rains. Robbie, how the heck you doing, brother?
I'm upright and breathing.
Sometimes that counts the most.
Yep. Just trying to get everything situated for the new one to drop, hopefully this week or next. I'm hoping, anyway.
You want to tell everybody a little bit about that new one?
Yeah. That's Doc and DA have been on me to throw cast my lot, so to speak, into the Dark Frontiers universe. So I have just finished Dark Frontiers War Journals, Blood Wolves of the Ardennes. And I really enjoy World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea. I love that era in history. So the Nightmare Hunter is going to be sharing some ground with Easy Company from Band of Brothers. I think it's going to be pretty good. I think y'all going to like it.
It's pretty epic. And since Doc couldn't be here, he wanted to say hi. So we're wishing him a good time up in Maine. So Doc, you be safe, and you guys have fun having that and teaching your class. I thought you guys might get a kick out of little Doc riding a moose. But we're going to jump into this with both feet because we got a lot of material to cover tonight. And I think you guys are really going to like this because while researching one of my newest book, which is Hangman's Legacy, The Lost Treasure of the Sangre de Cristos, I stumbled onto something, and that's really what inspired this show tonight. But as we jump into this, we always remember that the woods have a way of holding on to old things, old sounds, old instincts, even old predators. And most people never notice it. They walk the trails, they take their photos, breathe the clean air, and they go home believing that the forest is just background scenery. But anyone who spent any real time out there, hunters, rangers, trackers, search and rescue teams, cops, paramedics who've had to go in the woods rescue, lots of people who spend a lot of time in the backwoods, they all know the truth. Because the woods are alive in ways that don't always fit neatly into field guides or biology textbooks. And every now and then, something steps out of that deeper layer. Something that doesn't match anything that we're supposed to have in North America. Something upright, something fast, and something with a face that hits you like a punch to the chest because your brain recognizes it before you do. Most folks call it the Gugway, the faceeater, a creature that doesn't bluff and doesn't hesitate. Y'all know how much research I do, especially for my books. I practically live in the archives. You can ask Robbie, I'm constantly digging through old research. I dig through the old journals, the anthropology papers, the expedition notes, and things most people skip because they're either dense or dry or written in a language that feels like it was never really meant for the public. All the wherefores and thous and all that. I've spent years building worlds, studying real history, real creatures, real biology, because I want my stories to feel like they could happen just beyond the edge of the firelight, like they might just walk off the page and be waiting for you around the next corner. But while pulling research for this newest project, I came across something that stopped me cold. Something buried in paleoanthropology literature. Something that shouldn't matter anymore. It was just a footnote in the fossil record. But suddenly it does. In fact, I think it matters a lot. I found a primate. Not just a primate, but a predator. A creature that lived in Eurasia during the Pleistocene era. A creature with the wrong face, the wrong posture, and the wrong instincts for the time. I'm talking about Paradolichopithecus. You guys have heard me talk about Gigantopithecus, which we believe is a great ape ancestor possibly of Bigfoot. But Paradolichopithecus is something else entirely. We're talking about a ground-dwelling, baboon-like primate with a long muzzle, forward-facing eyes, and a body built for speed and aggression. Not a hominid, not an ape, something older, and something meaner. Something that lived in the shadows of the Ice Age predators and learned how to survive by being just as dangerous. And here's the part that made me really sit back in my chair. The skull shape, the muzzle, the limb proportions, and the behavior that paleontologists have inferred from the bone structure. It all lines up with modern Gugway encounters in a way that's really hard to ignore. Now, I'm not saying Paradolichopithecus is the Gugway, but I'm saying this. If a population of these primates migrated north, followed the megafauna herds, crossed the Bering Strait, and adapted to the brutal cold of the Pleistocene, we might be looking at the ancestor of one of the most terrifying creatures ever reported in North America. Tonight, we're going to trace that possibility. We're going to walk backward through time and look at the fossil record, the migration routes, the evolutionary pressures, and the modern encounters that all point toward a single unsettling conclusion. The Gugway's not a myth, but it may be a survivor. And if that's true, then the face-eater may be older and smarter than we ever imagined. So before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to support the show and help us grow, consider joining the channel memberships. It helps keep the research going, keeps the lights on, and helps us bring you these kinds of stories that most folks are too afraid to touch. All right, so now let's get into it. Before we jump into the first segment, though, there's a few things we want to discuss. And Robbie, you feel free to jump in on this right here with me. We want to talk about really what stands apart between Gugway and Sasquatch.
Well, obviously, one of the biggest things is, or the facial structure is a big thing, but to me, the aggression and that type of behavior is probably the biggest difference. you know, and we've talked about, the misidentification on certain charts that we think certain charts have, instead of it being a dog man, we think that's probably misidentified Gugway. We've talked about that. That kind of goes into the facial structure thing, but the aggression that we've heard about that to me, that's one of the biggest things. And I think that's, we've talked about the further north you go, the meaner things get. Well, you just said that this thing lived in the shadow of the Ice Age. So could it stand to reason that up in Alaska and parts of Canada and these places that get really cold, could it be that's what we're looking at, and that's why they're more aggressive?
Well, we also get into that here in the next few segments. We're going to actually get into the theory, because you guys have heard us talk about this more than a dozen times, I guarantee you, that just take modern bears as the perfect example. And the what this rule is called is, it's called Bergman's Law. Look in the lower 48, you see black bears. They're 300 to 500 pounds, unless you get a really rare example that's 600-700, but that's extremely rare. 300 to 400 pounds is a good sized blackie in the lower 48. They're generally not all that aggressive. They're mostly foragers. They'll eat roadkill. They'll even kill animals. However, they spend most of their time browsing berries, roots, whatever. Get a little farther north, get into the grizzly bears, they get bigger. They also get a little more aggressive. They'll still eat berries and roots, but they eat a lot more meat. Why? Because the weather up there's a little colder. And you get even farther north and you start running into like the Alaskan brown bear. Alaskan brown bear are way bigger, especially the coastal brown bear. They're way bigger than a grizzly. And their diet is primarily meat and fish. However, they still will eat roots and berries. But when you get up to the north, beyond the Arctic Circle into the polar bear territory, those things are just pure meat eaters. That's it. Pure meat eaters. And that's Bergman's Law. The farther north, the harsher the climate, the bigger and stronger and more robust the animal has to be just to survive.
And so, but that touches a little bit on the territory patterns also, because like we say, depending on the territory and the environment that their territory is in, that dictates a lot of their behavior and how aggressive they may or may not be. So I guess some of the initial reactions to this thing could be something like, well, how obscure is it? How many of these Gugway sightings are actually an ancestor of this thing?
Exactly. Let me grab something real quick. I'm going to bring up an image. When you guys hear us talk about Gugway, probably the best example of Gugway I've ever seen. And I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Primal Rage. We've mentioned it before. I'm going to bring this image up real quick. This is probably the best adaptation. Yeah, this is a perfect representation of a Gugway. You look at that, it's got the pronounced baboon-like skull, got the massive canine teeth. Now, with that image in mind, folks, I'm going to bring up a different image. And I think you guys are going to kind of see what I'm talking about. This is not a representation of the Gugway. This is not anybody's drawing on Bigfoot. This is a paleontological representation of Paradolykopithecus. And if you take a look at this after seeing that last picture, I really think this one kind of speaks for itself. So let me bring this one up real quick, and I will share that image now. That is what they believe Paradolykopithecus looked like. Anybody notice anything? And we're talking not an ape, a monkey. This is an old world monkey. You can still see the vestigial remnants of its tail. This thing was built for speed. It was human sized, and it was incredibly fast. And spent a lot of its time walking upright. And we will get into the tail and the upright posture as we get farther in. But this is Paradolykopithecus, folks. And if that's not a likeness of the modern Gugway, I don't know what is. Robbie, what do you think, brother?
I think Hollywood might have got it right for once.
I think so. And here's the great thing about Paradolipithecus. It was an ancestor of modern baboons. And what is baboon behavior known for? They don't attack like hyenas, they don't attack like wolves, they don't attack like lions, because most predators go for the throat. Baboons, mandrills, and other species of similar monkeys go for the face. They try to gouge out the eyes. They try to bite off the cheeks. They try to destroy the face. It's both territorial aggression and a way to incapacitate its prey. So that's exactly how it attacks.
What you're saying is they're face eaters.
They are face eaters. Even modern baboons, when they attack other monkeys or even people, they go for the face.
Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah. So, putting all this in mind, when you look at what the actual name Gugway means, it's an old Micmac word that means face eater. When you look at the behaviors of old world monkeys like the baboons, the mandrills, and they go for the face, they attack the face, they'll tear the face completely off of a victim. We're starting to see a behavior pattern. The only thing we're missing is the Paradolipithecus was smaller. They were about human-sized, maybe 100, 120 pounds. However, this was during the Pleistocene. This was hundreds of thousands of years ago, and things change, especially when they go north following the herds. So, Robbie, you want to? I'll lead us into segment one. So, we've laid the groundwork here. Let's talk about the creature itself. Before we can trace a lineage, we need to understand the modern animal. The sightings, the behavior, the physical descriptions, and the patterns that separate the Gugway from every other cryptid reported in North America. Because once you see those differences clearly, the evolutionary picture really starts to come into focus. Robbie, you want to take her away?
All right. So, what we know about the Gugway. When we talk about the Gugway, we're not talking about a creature that fits neatly into the usual categories. This isn't a regional variant of a Sasquatch. It isn't a misidentified bear. It isn't a campfire story that grew legs over the years. The Gugway stands apart in every meaningful way. It's in its appearance, its behavior, its aggression, and the way people describe the fear that hits them when they see it. That's where we need to start. Before we can trace lineage back to the Ice Age, we have to understand the modern creature. We have to look at the sightings, the patterns, the behaviors, the physical traits that show up again and again, no matter where the encounter takes place. Because once you see the Gugway clearly, the evolutionary picture starts to sharpen. Most people who've seen Sasquatch describe something massive, powerful, and intimidating, but not immediately hostile. This is a key thing to keep in mind. There's a sense of intelligence there, a sense of restraint, even curiosity. Sasquatch encounters often feel like you've stumbled into someone else's territory and they're deciding whether you're worth the trouble or not. The Gugway doesn't give you that luxury. When people describe the Gugway, the first thing they talk about is the face. Not the height, not the build, the face. The long baboon-like muzzle, heavy jaws, forward-facing eyes that don't blink the way a human does, a mouth built for tearing, not chewing, and a presence that feels wrong in the way that bypasses language and hits straight into your instincts. Witnesses don't say, "I saw something strange." They say, "I saw something that wanted to hurt me." And that's putting it kind of PG-13 it up.
Yeah, and how many times have we heard stories of people being physically chased out of the woods by a Gugway? Heck, that one that's right down here in Arkansas, people were on horseback and barely got away.
Yeah. And honestly, that's the big difference. The Gugway isn't cautious. It isn't curious. And it isn't trying to avoid contact. It's territorial, aggressive, and predatory. People describe it pacing the tree line, shadowing them through the timber, circling campsites, charging without warning, and in some cases coming close enough that they can smell the breath, a hot, rotten animal stink that sticks in the memory for years. That isn't bluff behavior. That's not intimidation. That's a creature that sees humans the way a big cat does, as something that might be a threat or might be prey, depending on the moment. And here's the part that always stands out to people like me, DA and Doc, and Steve, every predator makes noise. That's a known fact. You know, we've talked about, you know, bears will huff, and you know, you'll hear wolves growl. Even cougars who are ambush hunters, they will make noises. Wolves, bears, mountain lions, just like I said, even when they're trying to be quiet, you can hear them. If you know what to listen for, twig snaps, shifting weight, brush moving. But the Gugway moves like it's built for silence, like the forest bends around it, like it's been hunting in the dark for so long that it doesn't need to think about what it's doing to stay hidden. It just is. That brings us to the behavior that shows up again and again in the reports, the face-focused aggression. Indigenous accounts call it the face-eater, not because it's a metaphor, because that's what it does, as DA just eloquently put it just a few minutes ago. When it attacks, it goes for the head, the mouth, the eyes, the cheeks. That's not hominid behavior. That's not ape behavior. That's old world monkey behavior, scaled up to something that shouldn't exist in North America. That's the first clue that we're dealing with a creature that doesn't fit into the usual cryptid categories. It's not a relic hominid. It's not a great ape. It's not a bear misidentified in low light. It's something else entirely. Something older, something meaner, something that evolved to survive in a world full of predators that will tear you apart if you hesitate for even a second. When you line up the sightings, the muzzle, the aggression, the silence, the territorial behavior, the face attacks, you start to see a pattern. A creature that behaves like a scaled up baboon, a creature that hunts like a primate predator, a creature that doesn't bluff because bluffing is a waste of energy. And that's why this creature theory matters. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that.
Paradolykopithecus.
I'm just going to say Dilacopithecus. Because for the first time,
I love you, brother. You kill me.
Yeah, well, you got to be good at something. Right? Because for the first time, we have a fossil lineage that matches the face, the posture, the behavior, and the instincts of the modern Gugway. Not perfectly. Nothing in evolution is perfect, but close enough that it demands a second look. Before we get into that lineage, though, we need to understand the modern creature, what it looks like, how it moves, how it hunts, and why it behaves the way it does. Because once you understand the modern Gugway, the evolutionary path becomes a little bit clearer. So let's contrast the Gugway versus the Sasquatch, DA. Intelligence versus aggression.
Well, I think the Sasquatch is more intelligent, but I'm not saying the Gugway is dumb. I'm saying I think the Sasquatch is more intelligent, but the Gugway is definitely more aggressive.
Well, that's just like saying what's more intelligent, an orangutan or a chimp. I mean, an orangutan or a what's that little monkey that Ace Ventura had? Capuchin.
Capuchin monkey, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're both intelligent, but that's comparing apples to oranges.
Right. Just Ryan's got a good point. He says maybe the Gugway and the baboon have a direct lineage because they both like to kidnap mammals. Yeah, the Paradolykopithecus is a direct ancestor of both, I believe.
So let's discuss the I don't even want to say the elephant in the room because the elephant wouldn't eat your face, but let's discuss the face eater reputation. The indigenous accounts, you know, the behavioral parallels with baboons, and most importantly, why this detail matters with what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, the name itself, Gugway, is it's derived from a Micmac word, Cuckway, which literally means face eater. That's literally what they call them.
So here's my here's my rhetorical question, but it's still a question that needs to be asked. Why would this indigenous tribe that's probably never seen a baboon name something that literally translates into face eater if it was something that they never saw?
Yeah, you pose a very good question there, my brother. What's the old expression? You're preaching to the choir.
Not just a hat rack, my friend.
And another great parallel is just how quiet they are.
Yeah.
Now, Paradolipithecus had to be quiet because in the Pleistocene, it was not one of the larger predators. It had to survive alongside of things like the short-faced bear, dire wolves, other massive predators that roamed the tundra and roamed both North America and Asia, which were connected by the Bering Strait.
All the different types of saber-toothed cats.
Right, all the types of saber-tooth. So in order for those things to survive, they had two choices. They could be eaten or they could get quiet. And I think they went the quiet route. And the farther north they migrated, and we've already got paleontological proof that they were in northern Siberia. So if we're in Siberia, it's just a straight line across the Bering Sea for them to have got Bering Strait for them to have gotten into North America. And at that point, it just becomes almost a biological necessity because they would have been following the big megafauna herds, and because that's where the food was.
And here's, I guess you could call it a theory. Because we talked about, or you mentioned that they were not the size of what the reports talk about today. But if it was that specific creature, okay, maybe there's a difference. But if it's a descendant, and there's not as many of them, and they're living in a harsh environment, what are they probably going to do?
Nick, you brought something out we were going to talk about pretty shortly. Look at baboons today. Baboons hunt in troops. They don't hunt one-on-one. They hunt in troops, and they tend to ambush their prey. I think that's the same thing with Gugway.
So, but my point where I was going with that is they've probably, adapted and gotten bigger.
Well, the farther north they went, Bergman's law would force them to get bigger or die out.
Out of necessity. They had to get bigger. They had to adapt to be able to survive.
Exactly. Estelle Hartington said something about, have they found the dire wolves that escaped? Did some of those escape?
Well, I refuse to call them dire wolves, but I don't know.
They're calling them dire wolves is kind of an anomaly because they're mixed with modern dogs and wolves, so it's not a true dire wolf. But it'd be interesting if those things got out and bred true. Certainly see a lot bigger wolves.
Yeah, because they are considerably bigger than gray wolves, but we won't get into the 24 million chromosomes that were left out.
Right. Yeah, just a guy says, they aren't actually dire wolves, designer gray wolves, yeah. So,
Exactly.
But that's neither here nor there. We're kind of getting off topic there.
Yep.
But look at the behavior. The charges, the pacing, the tree line stalking, and it's generally done in just complete silence, except for when they want you to know they're there.
And that's I guess that's a good question to ask is, why do they want you to know they're there?
Either they're driving you into an ambush, or they just want you the heck out of their territory.
Or they could be like we talked about, because think about remember the story we read about the deputies in the boathouse?
Mm-hmm.
Why did they not go in there and get them? Maybe they were seasoning their meat with fear.
Yeah.
That adrenaline
They want you afraid.
That adrenaline rush going through the meat. Maybe that's something that they crave.
Yeah, very well could be. I think that theory makes a lot of sense. And again, when you look at this picture of Paradolipithecus, if there's a modern genetic descendant,
now there was another very large baboon type called Dinopithecus.
Mm-hmm.
Further back, I wonder if that is in the same.
Probably in the same family tree, because Dinopithecus was still primarily went on all fours. It looked like just a big upscaled version of a modern baboon. Paradolipithecus was mostly bipedal.
You're talking about a baboon the size of a short-faced bear, though.
Yeah, a massive baboon. So what if relic populations of Dinopithecus and Paradolipithecus evolved? Oh, we got a question. Richie Evans says, "How about direwolves are the dogman y'all are seeing out there?" I don't know. I don't know about that. It's possible that dogman could have descended from direwolf, but it would have had to have done it a long time ago, because we've got dogman sightings going back to ancient Rome and Greece. Miss Lene says, "Do you guys think the day will come that the Gugway packs will attack smaller towns or rural homes for people as food source, kind of like cougars and coyotes?" Not only do I think it's possible, I think it's probably already happened. How many times have we profiled, someone went to check on an elderly relative and they were just gone? There was one case of a guy down in Arkansas was just gone. They said he had dementia and he wandered off, but his truck was parked in front of the house, groceries in the back of the truck, and the door was standing open and the keys were still in the ignition. He didn't wander off. He went to unload groceries and something snatched him up. So I think it's already happening. It's just when things like that, when they attack that quickly and nobody's got a chance to fight back, we don't hear the story. All we hear is a missing person. Monica Monica Devias. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Says, "I don't think dogmen came from direwolf." Maybe they've got a shared genetic ancestor somewhere, but the talk of dogman type creatures, what they used to refer to as the cynocephali, date back thousands of years. In fact, there are even dogman type creatures in the margins on the Pura Rice map, which we know is thousands of years old.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure. I used to think it was possible that dogman evolved from direwolf. But I'm not so sure. Just a guy says, "What was the case where a bunch of people were missing from their homes and a military was called in? Some guys supported a kill team. Was a support to the kill." Yeah, that was supposedly a group of aggressive Bigfoot. Was it North Carolina, Robbie?
Yeah, North Carolina. Supposed to be supposedly a SEAL team went in. Mr. Ballin had that. That's the show that was on. Where the guy was. And I'm not, when I say claiming, I'm not saying he was right, wrong. I'm just saying that was his claim, that he was part of the support team that went in there. So
Toshi says, I can see those Paradolipithecus, whatever you said the name was, if they can hunt in troops like baboons today, got bigger by hunting larger megafauna and even chasing off other predators. Yeah, biologically that makes the most sense. That they evolved from what we know of as the Gugway got its common ancestor all the way back in Paradolipithecus, because it makes sense. It makes scientific sense. Robbie, you want to lead us into the next segment?
Sure. So now that we've laid out what the Gugway is and what it isn't, it's time to look backward, because somewhere in the fossil record there's a creature with the right face, the right posture, the right instincts to explain everything we're seeing today. It's not a hominid. It's not an ape. It's something far older. In segment 2, we're going to meet the Dinopithecus, the Pareidolia Dinopithecus thing that he's talking about, the forgotten primate that may hold the key to the Gugway mystery. Take it away, DA.
Paradolipithecus, the lost primate. If you've never heard of Paradolipithecus, you're not alone. Most people haven't. Even a lot of anthropologists only know the name in passing because it's tucked away in the margins of some Pleistocene research paper. It's not a species that gets documentaries or museum exhibits. It's not a fossil that school kids memorize. It's just a footnote. A strange primate that lived in Eurasia during the Ice Age and then vanished. But sometimes the footnotes matter more than the headlines. Because when I first came across Paradolipithecus, it wasn't because I was looking for it. I was digging through research for my book, cross-referencing known predators that could help explain the Gugway. I think I started out with the question in Google, which primates have had claws? I think that's where this started, and it took me down a rabbit hole. And then I started digging and even went to the library. And when I started digging and looking for what could explain the Gugway, there it was. There was a skull reconstruction that didn't look like anything I really expected. It had a long muzzle, the forward-facing eyes, and a powerful jaw built for power, not for finesse, and a posture that wasn't even remotely like a modern baboon. It wasn't quite hominid, and it wasn't quite anything we have walking around today. And that's what stopped me, because the face, the shape of it, the angles, the proportions, it looked a hell of a lot like the descriptions that people give of the Gugway. Now, let's be clear, Paradolipithecus wasn't huge. It wasn't an 8-foot tall monster. It wasn't massive, but it had the right blueprint. This was a ground-dwelling old-world monkey, not an arboreal one. That alone makes it unusual. Most monkeys live in trees. They rely on tails for balance, on agility for survival. But Paradolipithecus lived on the ground, in open woodlands and cold plains, surrounded by predators that would tear it apart if it hesitated. The environment shapes a creature. It hardens it. It forces adaptations that don't show up in gentler branches of the primate family tree. And the fossils tell us a few important things. 1, it had long limbs built for speed. Not for tree climbing speed, running speed, chase speed, escape speed. It had a robust skull with a long predatory muzzle. Not the flat face of a hominid, not the rounded face of an ape. Something older, something much closer to a baboon, but scaled differently. And, number 3, it lived in cold climates. Not tropical forests, not warm savannas, cold, harsh, ice age environments. That matters, because cold climates push animals toward larger body sizes. It's a rule of biology. Bergman's rule, in fact. Bigger bodies hold heat better. Bigger bodies survive winter better. Bigger bodies outcompete smaller ones. So, when you take a primate that's already ground-dwelling, already aggressive, already built for speed, and you drop it into a world full of giant predators, cave lions, hyenas, wolves, bears, saber-toothed tigers, you get a creature that either adapts or it dies. And Paradolipithecus adapted. Now here's where things start to get interesting. During the Pleistocene, the land bridge between Eurasia and North America, known as the Bering Strait or the Bering Land Bridge, it wasn't just open, it was a highway. Mammoths crossed it, bison crossed it, wolves crossed it, and humans crossed it. There's no reason a cold-adapted primate couldn't cross it too, especially one that followed megafauna herds for food, scavenging or opportunistic hunting. Especially one that lived in social groups, and especially one that already had the instincts of a predator. And if a population of Paradolipithecus made that crossing, they would have entered a world that forced them to change even more. North America during the Ice Age wasn't gentle. It was brutal. Short-faced bears, dire wolves, the Smilodon, also known as the saber-toothed tiger, human hunters, competition everywhere. Small primates don't survive in that world. But the ones that get bigger, stronger, faster, and meaner, they survive. And if that's the evolutionary path we're exploring tonight, that's not a myth, that's not a monster, that's a lineage. A primate that started small, crossed the land bridge, and grew into something that could hold its own against the apex predators of the Pleistocene. And when you look at the skull of Paradolipithecus, you see the seed of something that could easily become the Gugway. Not in one leap, and certainly not overnight, but over thousands of years of pressure, competition, and survival. There's the muzzle, the eyes, the posture, the aggression inferred from the bone structure. It's all there, just waiting for the right environmental push to push it further. And that's why this species matters, because it gives us a starting point. A creature that fits the behavioral and morphological profile of a Gugway better than anything else in the fossil record. And it's not a hominid, and it's not an ape. It's a primate predator. And if that lineage survived, even if it was just a small population that made it to North America, then the creature people are seeing today might not be a mystery at all. It might just be the last surviving branch of a forgotten primate family. So, why Paradolitopithecus is so obscure? Limited fossils. There's not only been a handful of them found. And what is it we've said about fossils, Robbie?
Well, fossils don't always appear of everything we've ever lived.
Yeah, less than 0.1% of all animals that ever lived have become fossilized. You've got to meet very specific criteria for fossils to form. And that would mean that we've only seen just a handful of examples of Paradolitopithecus. What if we're only seeing little ones?
Yep. Because, if you just think about every fossil you see in a museum, and people think, oh, look at all these fossils. But when you really start thinking about the numbers that you just said, that's barely a scratch in everything that actually has ever existed. That's that whole thing. You draw a big circle and, okay, how much of the fossil record that we know would you draw a circle inside this circle to represent? It'd probably be the size of a pinhole.
Pretty much. Richie, I think you're talking about Dr. Melba Ketchum's DNA research into Bigfoot. To my knowledge, there's never been a comprehensive DNA search on Gugway because samples are so rare of anything of the Gugway. Anyway, go ahead, Robbie. Sorry. I wanted to answer that before I forgot.
Just what existed outside of what we already have observed. I mean, and what could have existed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have no idea some of the species that never fossilized. I'm sure there's entire genus and species that just disappeared. But also, with only a handful of fossils found for Paradolitopithecus, it's been completely overshadowed by people researching hominids, like Folsom Man, Piltdown Man, Australopithecus, the hobbit bones they found. Most people that go into, what is that? Is it trying to think of the word, paraanthropology? Something like that. I can't remember the word I'm looking for. They go into research like that to look into hominids, and a lot of the primate research just gets kind of put by the wayside. But when you look at the relics that we do have, look at that skull shape. Look at the skull morphology, the muzzle, the eye placement, the jaw strength. Those have direct comparisons to modern baboons, only bigger. And if this thing went across the land bridge and Bergman's law kicked in, you can clearly see how Paradolitopithecus could be a modern Gugway.
100%. I think, like you said, it clearly supports better than anything else, and that it kind of goes with our what does nature show you? Look in nature. Look what we already studied. Obviously, that's something that's already been discovered in nature.
Mm-hmm. But the environment also would have shaped it. Cold climates, predator-rich ecosystems, and that matters. That matters a lot when it comes to evolution because it pushes the creature to either die out or change to compete. And when most people think about the thank you, Miss Lene. When most people think about the land bridge from across the Bering Sea, they think it was just this narrow strip of land. But what people don't realize is it was hundreds of miles wide. It had grasslands. It had its own forests. It was a massive corridor, like a superhighway, literally hundreds of miles wide. Miss Lene, thank you for the reminder. Paleoanthropology. That's what we're talking about. Not paleontology. Paleoanthropology. Thank you, Alexander. He pointed out this is paleontology or anthropology, and that's what stuck out. Paleoanthropology is the study of anthropology from Paleolithic times. Richie says, how about the mountain giants that have been in the past 100 years? There have been 100 cases. Again, a little off topic, but there's lots of mountain giant reports. But most of the mountain giants are just they describe them as being massive, oddly proportioned humans, not necessarily the Gugway. But then you start finding places like the Nahanni Valley and that valley down in the Superstition Mountains where they keep finding people without heads. I think that's a little telling. Thank you, John Wayne. Appreciate it, sir. Robbie, you got anything to add on that?
I think the picture's shaping up though. So
yeah, I think we've definitely found a possible ancestor. And I think the more we discuss this and the more we point these things out, folks, I think the picture's going to get pretty clear for y'all. I don't think this is just some crackpot theory. I think we're painting a direct ancestor of the modern Gugway, and because it makes sense. It makes sense scientifically. It makes sense, from a genetic standpoint. It makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. It really does stand the litmus test when you start looking into it. And also, monkeys are known tool users, and they learn. They adapt and they learn. That's one thing that really makes them stand out. And when we start adding that into the Gugway, I think we see an adaptable, highly aggressive, intelligent, upright monkey, basically a monkey that lost its tail. I don't think they're any more closely related to Bigfoot than we are. They're a different genetic path of a different animal, and I think the more we dig into this, the more we learn about these different cryptids. I think we're going to see that there's really not one source for all of them. I think they're all descendants of something different, including us. We still got a few minutes yet till ad time. So, Robbie, if this thing, if this Paradolitopithecus did reach North America, how do you see the pressures that it had to deal with, like all the big predators and the cold and the rough terrain? How do you see that shaping the creature we see today?
Well, obviously, it would account for the aggression because it would have to be aggressive to be able to survive. I think it accounts for like you said, bigger body size for cold climates. So I think that's something that it would have to adapt. Just like those finches that they talked about on the Galapagos Islands. You got one group over here that adapted to eat those hard-shelled nuts. So their beaks had to adapt to be able to break the shells of those nuts open so they could eat them. Same thing with this. If they're going to be surviving and competing with things like saber-toothed cats, short-faced bears, things like that, obviously they're intelligent, so they're going to have to use that to their advantage. They hunt in troops. But those two things in itself is not going to help them survive against something that predators of those sizes, unless they themselves become predators of those sizes or closer.
Robbie, I got a surprise image for you.
Okay.
This one is specifically for you and for you to show off your impressive tracking skills. I'm going to bring up an image. Okay. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm not going to tell you what this animal is. But this is a modern existing animal, and from what you know of Gugway tracks, the shape of the track, the claws on the toes, how would this track stack up?
Well, okay, let's because I know it's going to come up at first glance. Everybody's going to think that looks like a bear track.
It's not a bear. I'll tell you that. Not a bear.
I know. I'm just saying that's the first thing that's going to pop out of people's minds is it's a bear track. But if you look at the heel impression, that's one of the first tells that it's not a bear track, because bear tracks don't narrow back and impress that deeply in the heel. The only thing that impresses deeply in the heel like that is something that walks on 2 legs. Something that walks on 4 legs, the weight is spread out and distributed evenly over 4 feet. Now, obviously, if you got a horse or something that's walking on hooves, that doesn't, because they don't have pads they walk on. But we're talking about mammals that walk with pads on their feet. The weight is dispersed more evenly. If you look, you can clearly see how much deeper that heel impression is than the rest of the track. So that tells me that whatever that was standing on 2 feet. Because
this is a baboon track. And baboons are notorious for attacking on 2 legs.
Well, that's... So you can see where the claws sliced into the ground, which meant the claws float. They're not... What's the word I'm looking? They're not hard. They're attached, but they're not like hard fused. Because if they were hard fused, the claws would dig deeper into the ground. To me, the claws are just kind of like, there's just enough pressure to sink down in the mud, which means they're for slashing. Because if you got claws like that, that's what those claws are made for, is cutting, slashing, tearing things off, whether it be a face or whatever.
There's one thing on this track that really jumped out at me. And a lot of people say that Gugway tracks sometimes have 5 toes, sometimes have 3. Okay, look at this. We've got 5 distinct toe impressions, yet only 3 claw impressions.
Yep, I was trying to make sure I didn't miss a claw impression, but yeah, there's only 3 claw impressions.
Could that be why sometimes people say Gugway only have 3 toes?
Very well could be.
Makes sense, doesn't it? And that's a modern baboon track. Now imagine that's completely adapted to walking upright and put on 300 pounds. And if you look, you can see the dermal ridging in that track.
Yeah.
That is a really good track. Anyway, we got about a minute before less than a minute before the commercials. Well, just real quick, how would you, your opinion, how would you describe that track as compared to a modern Gugway?
Looks a lot like the tracks that they found in that bean field in Arkansas.
Sure does. Looks shockingly
only
like
smaller.
Yeah. Now scale that up to an animal that weighed 600-700 pounds and was 7 feet tall. I think we've got a contender. What do you think, Robbie?
Like I said, I think the picture is taking shape.
All right, folks, we are going to take a quick pause to pay the bills, keep the lights on, and here are a few words from our sponsors. You guys can jump up, grab a cup of coffee, stretch your legs, whatever you all need to do. We will be back in just a few minutes. Thank you guys for sticking with us.
The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to Research a Haunted House can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com. 2026 is off to a great start, and it's almost time. With many exciting predictions and the recent emphasis on a potential major planetary event occurring in April, it promises to be a super transformational month, and we couldn't be more excited to be in Hawaii during this shift to integrate new frequencies. Folks, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. April the 20th through the 24th, 2026, join us in Kona, Hawaii for Journey to Truth's very first vacation conference retreat. Enjoy 9 presenters over 5 days with ocean adventures with dolphins and whales and sacred sites and so much more. Experience Hawaii like never before. You will enjoy 5 days on the Big Island, so don't wait. Start planning your trip today at journeytotruth.online. That's journeytotruth.online. The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Pocket Doc Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DARoberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview Man, from the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the dead rise, the Ragnarok Rising saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and man's marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of DARoberts.
And we are back, folks. I want to take a quick second to let you guys know why we pause for commercials at the top of every hour. It's because since we joined the UNX network, we are no longer just broadcasting here on YouTube. We're going out on several different podcast networks simultaneously, as well as on iHeartRadio. So this little show of ours is hitting a lot bigger audience than it ever did before. And since we're on iHeartRadio, we have to take a commercial break every hour. So having said that, that's why we've been doing this, and we're going to jump right back into this because we've got a lot of material still to cover. Now that we've met Paradolitopithecus, the primate with the wrong face and the right instincts, it's time to follow its trail. Because if this creature crossed into North America, the Ice Age would have reshaped it in ways we still see in modern encounters. In the next segment, we're going to look at the migration routes, the climate, and the evolutionary pressures that could turn a proto-baboon into a predator that still stalks the deep timber. Robbie, you want to take away the next section?
The migration. How a proto-baboon reached North America. When we talk about the Ice Age migrations, most people picture mammoths and bison moving across endless plains of snow. They picture wolves trailing herds, humans following behind with spears, and the land bridge of the Bering Strait stretching between continents like a frozen highway. What they don't picture, what almost no one pictures, is primates. But the Ice Age didn't care about our assumptions. It didn't care about what should or shouldn't be possible. It cared about survival, and survival has a way of pushing species into places they were never expected to go. Big creature we've been talking about. I probably could pronounce it, but I'm just going to go on. Was going to survive the predators of Eurasia: cave lions, hyenas, wolves, bears. It had no choice, either adapt or move. And in the Pleistocene, was a time when movement wasn't just possible, it was constant. Herds moved, predators moved, humans moved. The climate shifted like a living thing, opening and closing corridors across the continents. And right in the middle of it was the Bering Strait. Now, the Bering Strait wasn't a narrow strip of land. It wasn't a bridge in the way we think of a bridge. It was a massive expanse, hundreds of miles wide, of grasslands, rivers, and rolling hills. A place where mammoths grazed, where bison thundered, where wolves hunted in packs that would make modern wolves look small. It was a world built for movement. And if you were a primate that lived on the ground, hunted opportunistically, scavenged when you had to, and followed megafauna herds for food, the Bering Strait wasn't a barrier, it was an opportunity. Let's talk about why a primate like Paradontalpithecus, I'm just going to pronounce it different every time, would make that journey. First, the climate. This was a cold, adapted species. It wasn't living in a tropical forest. It wasn't swinging through trees. It wasn't surviving in harsh, open environments where winters could kill you if you weren't fast enough, smart enough, and aggressive enough. Second is the food source. The megafauna herds were the lifeblood of the Ice Age. If you followed them, you survived. If you didn't, you starved. A primate that scavenged kills, small game, from predators would naturally track those herds, and in the Pleistocene, those herds moved north across the Bering Strait and into North America. Third is the competition. Eurasia was crowded with predators. North America was too, but the dynamics were different. New territory means new opportunities, new prey, new niches, and new ways to survive. A primate that could run, fight, and think would have a real chance in that environment. And here's the part that people forget. Primates are adaptable. They're problem solvers. They're opportunistic. They go where the food is, where the shelter is, where the survival odds tilt even slightly in their favor. If the big baboon reached the northern edges of Siberia, and the fossil record suggests it lived farther north than most primates ever have, then the leap to the Bering Strait isn't a stretch. It's a straight line. Now imagine a small population making that crossing. Not thousands, not even hundreds, just enough to establish a foothold. Once they reached North America, the real transformation would begin. The continent wasn't gentle. It was a battleground. Short-faced bears that could outrun horses, dire wolves that hunted in coordinated packs, Smilodon with jaws built to crush bone, human hunters who were smarter, faster, and more organized than anything the world had ever seen before. If you were a primate in that world, you either became something formidable or you died. And that's where the evolutionary pressures start to make sense. A primate that was already ground-dwelling would become more upright. A primate that was already aggressive would become even more aggressive and more territorial. A primate that was already fast would become faster. A primate that already had a predatory muzzle would develop stronger jaws, larger canines, and a skull built for power. And a primate that relied on silence to survive would become a ghost in the timber. And this part of the story where the Gugway this is the part of the story where the Gugway begins to take shape, not as a myth, not as a monster, but as a lineage, a creature shaped by the same forces that built the Ice Age giants. When you look at the migration patterns of the Pleistocene, the idea of a primate crossing North America isn't far-fetched. It's logical. It fits the climate, fits the ecology, it fits the behavior of the species, or it fits the behavior of the species we're talking about. And once that primate arrived here, the continent would do the rest. Bigger, stronger, smarter, meaner. A creature built to survive in a world where hesitation meant death. A creature that could still be holding on out there today.
And that's the thing about the Bering Strait. When we talk about the land bridge from Eurasia into North America, people, when they hear the word bridge, they think of bridges that we have, just wide enough for traffic to pass across. But that wasn't the case. Like I was saying earlier, the Bering Strait, when it was above water, it was hundreds of miles wide with its own ecosystem. Not only did it support life on its own, there was so much distance on there that large numbers of animals could move all across that without ever running into each other.
So I think that's a great point. It pretty much was its own environment.
It was. It had its own ecosystem because it wasn't just above water for a day or two. It was above water for eons, for hundreds of not thousands of years. Rodney, no, we have not captured a vocalization of a Gugway that we know of. But we are hoping to catch one, preferably from a distance, right, Robbie?
Yeah, we're hoping to catch it, not it catch us.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't want to come out of the woods, come out of the deep woods as a Gugway bowel movement. But like what you were saying, something about primate adaptability, Robbie. Even we see that even in modern primates. They're opportunistic feeders. They follow herds, and they have flexible behavior. They change their behavior to suit the environment they're in. We've seen that with chimps learning to use tools. We've seen that with gorillas, how they change their nesting habits depending on what part of the mountains they're in. Same thing with the billy ape. People didn't even think it existed, but it has all the aggressiveness of large chimps with a lot of the behaviors of large gorillas. It's really kind of an odd animal, but it does perfectly example of its adaptability.
Yeah. And speaking of the gorilla, I mean, what was it? 1953 before the mountain gorilla was ever even discovered in the West.
Something like that. Yeah. Roxanne says, how do you think a Gugway sound would be different from a Bigfoot? If you really want to hear this is just me thinking because I have not encountered one in the wild. But if you really want to hear what the differences would probably sound like, go on YouTube and listen to the calls of mountain gorillas, because there's lots of videos of it, and then listen to calls of baboons. It's totally different, completely different animals, total different vocal structure, totally different vocalizations. And I think a Gugway would probably be would be a lot more like an upgunned baboon than it would be a gorilla. Robbie, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we haven't heard a vocalization that we know of. Some of these unknown vocalizations that we've heard maybe, but who knows? But I tend to agree with you that it's probably, since it shares a lot of traits with the baboon, I would think the vocalization would tend to sound more like that, but probably, like you said, like turned up to 11 Spinal Tap.
Yeah. Or like a howler monkey. Talk about something that'll give you the heebie-jeebies if you don't know what it is. But what do you think? If a small population made it across, yeah, it would have a lot of genetic bottlenecks to overcome. But look how quickly, just from a small group, large groups can emerge. Do you think a small group was enough, or do you think several small groups, like family groups, might have come over?
I mean, I think it's probably more likely that several small family groups came over. And yeah, there's probably genetic bottlenecks like you were talking about. And, people always, that leads to inbreeding and things like that. But things like that are a little bit different with animals than they are with people. Because, I mean, just look at dogs. I mean, that's how we got all the different species of dogs, is from stuff like that. So I don't know. I don't know. As far as that part of it, I'm not a geneticist.
Me
So
either.
I don't know that that's 100%. I don't think we tend to think in terms of us and how we, but animals are so adaptive, and so because we think about things too much, and a lot of times we get in our own way by, oh, well, we need, instead of just reacting and acting, and that's what animals do, and that's why they survive and adapt and things, because they don't think about it. They don't have to sit there and think, oh, I can't do this. They just do it. And I think that's that's where you get a lot of these animals that survive, and we don't even see them, because they know if they show themselves, they know what's going to happen. So I don't think they would have the problems that we think they would. I mean, they would have problems, but I just don't think they're as great an obstacle as we would like to put on them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, here's a thought. What if if a Paradolipithecus ran into another remnant population of Dinopithecus? They'd be close enough genetically that they should be able to interbreed. And look what happens with hybrids.
Well, most hybrids are born sterile, but not all.
Yeah, especially if they're hybrids within the same species. When you breed a mule and a horse, a donkey and a horse, you get a mule, and mules are sterile, but that doesn't always apply in the wild. They recently found it was somewhere in Asia. I was reading the article. They recently found what they thought was a wolf, and when they genetically tested it, it was 55% dog. And that up until then, they didn't think a dog and a wolf could breed true, and it did. It bred, and it was part of the pack, and it had offspring. But they did find a legitimate dog wolf hybrid.
Just looking at Florida Everglades right now. I don't know that they've actually 100% confirmed it, but there is so many stories coming out of there of the Nile crocodiles that are. And there are Nile crocodiles in the Florida Everglades.
There are.
They're breeding with them. They're breeding with the American crocodiles, because they're now American crocodile usually the American crocodile species usually topped at, like, I may be a little bit off on this, but I want to say 12 to 13 feet ish. Mm-hmm. They're finding species like up to 16 to 18 feet and possibly up to 20 feet, which is average for a Nile crocodile now. So, but there you go.
That's a lot of reptile.
Yeah, but they're both crocodiles, but they're still different. So, but you don't have that same problem that you have of things being sterile, because they're close enough.
Exactly. If they are close enough genetically, they probably wouldn't be sterile at all. Roxanne says, how many Pithecus are there? Well, it just depends on if you're looking at just simply primates or if you're looking at hominids. I mean, you've got Australopithecus, you've got Australopithecus, you've got Piltdown Man, you've got Lucy from that they found in Africa, the hobbits. There's lots of different hominid species through the genetic drift over the centuries, millennia, millions of years. But the same thing happens with primates. So as they find more and more new ones, there's always going to be new names added to the Pithecus family. But ones we're primarily focusing on tonight are Dinopithecus and Paradolipithecus.
Yeah, that one.
But
I'm just going to say little Dinopithecus from now on.
There you go. So now that we followed this primate across the Bering Strait and into North America, it's time to talk about what happened next. Because the Ice Age didn't just break challenge species, it just challenged the species, it formed them. And in the next segment, we're going to look at the evolutionary pressures that could turn a proto-baboon into a predator people still encounter in the deep timber today. Robbie, is those some of mine or yours?
I think this one's yours.
Alrighty.
Because I think yeah.
I think you did. All right, so this segment, we're going to talk about the evolutionary leap, how it became the Gugway. When a species crosses into a new land, it doesn't stay the same. It can't. The environment shapes it. Predators shape it. The prey shapes it. And over time, the creature that arrived is not the creature that survives. So if a population of Paradolitopithecus made it into North America during the Pleistocene, the world waiting for them wasn't just different, it was completely unforgiving. This continent didn't offer second chances. It didn't reward hesitation. It didn't tolerate weakness. Everything in North America during the Pleistocene was built for power, speed, and sheer brutality. And that's where the evolutionary leap begins. Let's start with size. Paradolitopithecus wasn't huge, 3 to 4 feet tall, 60 to 100, 120 pounds, lean and fast, built for survival, not dominance. But in North America, during the Ice Age, it didn't favor small primates. It favored giants. We had short-faced bears that stood between 16 and 18 feet tall on their hind legs and could run faster than a horse. You had dire wolves that hunted in packs that could take down bison. Smilodon or saber-toothed tiger, they had jaws built to crush bone. And humans, early, hungry, relentless humans, were spreading across the continent with weapons and teamwork that no animal had ever seen before. In that world, small primates die. But the ones that get bigger, the ones that get stronger, faster, and more aggressive, those are the ones that survive. And this is really where Bergmann's rule comes into play. The biological principle that cold climates produce larger animals. Bigger bodies hold heat better. Bigger bodies survive the winter better. Bigger bodies outcompete smaller ones. We need to look no further than modern bear species. Black bears in the lower 48 are smaller, but look what happens as we move north. The grizzly get bigger and meaner, and so do the polar bears. So a primate that started at 3 or 4 feet tall could, over thousands of years, scale up to 7 or 8 feet tall pretty easily. Not because it wanted to, but because the environment demanded it. And now let's talk about posture. Paradolitopithecus was already semi-upright. Not fully bipedal, but not strictly quadrupedal either. It moved like a modern baboon. Ground-oriented, fast, and capable of short bursts of upright movement. But in North America, upright movement becomes an advantage. You can see farther, you can intimidate rivals, you can carry food, and you can fight with your hands. And once a primate starts using its hands for combat, for grabbing, for tearing, the tail becomes a liability. It throws off balance. It gives predators something to grab, it wastes energy, so over time, the tail starts to shrink and eventually disappears. Same thing happens with humans. Somewhere way down our evolutionary tract, we once had tails. Because people are still born every year with vestigial tails. I saw a guy in the jail, an inmate. He had like a 6-inch tail that he could actually shake. Usually when infants are born with one, it's just snipped off. The doctors usually just take care of it. But this guy still had his. So it's still vestigial. It's still part of our DNA that just isn't active. And this isn't speculation. It's exactly what happened in our own lineage. Once early hominins committed to upright walking, the tail became dead weight and evolution cut it loose. Now let's talk about the face. This is the part that makes people uncomfortable because it lines up too well with modern encounters. Paradolitopithecus had a long muzzle. It had forward-facing eyes. It had jaws built for power. The canines that were already massively pronounced. Now put that creature in a world where it has to fight off wolves, bears, and humans. Put it in a world where it has to kill fast or die. Put it in a world where scavenging just isn't enough. It has to hunt. What happens? The muzzle gets stronger. The canines get larger. The jaw muscles thicken. The skull becomes more robust. And the face becomes a weapon. And that's exactly what witnesses describe when they talk about the Gugway. Not a flat human-like face. Not an ape-like face. A predatory muzzle. A face built for tearing. A face that looks like it belongs on something that survived the Ice Age by being meaner than everything around it. Now let's talk about the behavior. This is where the evolutionary leap really becomes unmistakable. Old world monkeys, especially baboons, are highly aggressive. They're territorial. They're focused in their attacks. They go straight for the face. They don't bluff. They don't posture. They go straight for the kill. Now scale that behavior up. Add size, add strength, and add the pressures of surviving in a predator-rich environment. Add the intelligence of a primate that has to outthink wolves and human. What do you get? A creature that moves silently, hunts by ambush, targets the face, charges without warning, defends territory with lethal force, watches from the tree line, and tracks prey with patience and strategy. That's not Sasquatch behavior, and that's not bear behavior. And it's certainly not wolf behavior. That's primate behavior. That's the Gugway. Now let's talk about the intelligence. Primates don't just adapt physically, they adapt mentally. They learn, they strategize, and they pass knowledge down through generations just like we do. A primate that survived the Ice Age would have to be smart. Smart enough to avoid human hunting parties, smart enough to hunt quietly, smart enough to use the terrain to its advantage, and smart enough to disappear when it needed to. And that's exactly what we see in modern encounters. People don't describe the Gugway as a dumb animal. They describe it as something calculating, something that watches and waits, and something that chooses when to reveal itself. That's not instinct, that's intelligence. So when we talk about the evolutionary leap, the transformation from Paradolitopithecus to the modern Gugway, we're not talking about a miracle. We're talking about biology. We're talking about pressure. We're talking about survival. A small primate enters North America. The continent reshapes it. The predators sharpen it. The climate enlarges it. The competition hardens it. And over thousands of years, the creature that emerges is something powerful, silent, territorial, and quite frankly, terrifying. Something that I believe still walks the deep timber today. Robbie, what do you think about Bergman's rule?
I mean, I think it's something that we see already in play. Look at this. Look at the size of polar bears versus the size of black bears, like we've said. Look at this. Look at the size of, any marine animal, be it mammal or otherwise, that lives in a colder ocean. They're bigger. Bigger whales have bigger blubber storage to keep them warmer in the cold waters. I mean, statistically speaking, the killer whale pods that are in the Arctic are bigger than the ones that you're going to find in places like California and places like that have warmer temperatures. So I think it's something that we can observe, just by what we already know. It's a fact.
Now, we've got prime examples of Bergman's law right now. I mean, just the bears alone are a great example. But you can look at other predatory species that roam the wilds. And I'm not just talking bears. Look at wolves. If you look at wolves down here in the lower 48, because they're pretty rare in Missouri, but you can find them in like Colorado and Wyoming. You look at those, they get pretty big, 120, 130 pounds, maybe a little bigger. But you get up into Canada and Alaska, and those things are damn near 200 pounds.
Well, look at humans. Humans are on average, at least male proportionally, are average bigger in places like Iceland and Finland and places that are colder. I mean, look at the average size of the strongman competitor in Iceland versus the United States. Brian Shaw's an outlier. He's 6'8", but he's nowhere near the average of most strongmen from the United States are like, 6'2", 6'3", something like that. I would say the average, people. You look at Half Thor. You look at Matt, or not Matt Mikkelsen. That's the actor.
Magnus Magnuson.
Magnus Vermagnuson, Sven Carlson. Look at all those guys. Every one of those guys are well over 6'6".
Mariusz Pudzianowski.
He was the outlier on the other side. He was only like 6'1", so he was short comparatively. But look how big he was, though.
Oh, he was massive.
He looked like a bodybuilder, but was, 5-time world's strongest man. So, but he was on the short side of that equation, but he's still 6'1". So, but for the most part, they're like average. I think Magnus for Magnuson's probably the ones I mentioned. He's probably I think he's like maybe 6'5".
There are some big dudes, though.
Yeah, all of them. Sven Carlson, Magnus for Magnuson, Magnus Samuelson. That's another one from that area. They're all well over 6'4", which is big. No matter how you stack it or how high you stack it.
Part of it could be all the human growth hormone they took too.
Well, yeah, and that's probably got something to do with it. But every one of those athletes take that kind of stuff. Oh, yeah. So if that was the case, every one of them would be that tall. You wouldn't have people like Bill Kazmaier, who we know probably one of the strongest men to ever walk the face of the earth. Kaz was he was like 5'11", maybe 6 foot. So if that was the only, or if that had, every one of them would be massive.
Exactly. But yeah, that's another great example of Bergman's rule. But as these things adapted and became more upright, it's only reasonable that the tail would just disappear, because like we were saying earlier, could have been grabbed during a fight. It also throws off balance, and it's just another body part that requires energy directed to it. So a tail really once it became fully upright, the tail offers no advantages whatsoever. So it would have easily disappeared. So, what do you think? What do you think about the muzzle, the way that muzzle developed?
Well, I mean, it's already there, so I think it just adapted to be more efficient. Just like I talked about with the finches, they already had a beak, but on that one particular island, one of the main things that they had to eat was those hard-shelled nuts, and their beak had to adapt to be able to open it. It's already there. It just became more efficient.
Right.
Same thing with them. They already had all those features from the picture you showed us. They already had all those features. They just had to become more efficient and more adaptive to the situation that they found themselves in. It's micro adaptation.
Let me bring up these images here. So, what we're basically talking here, when you compare Paradolitopithecus with the modern Gugway, the social structure, the troop-based, for Paradolitopithecus was like a troop-based. Then you look at the Gugway, small groups or solitary apex individuals, but I believe they travel in troops. I really do. Aggression, they're both extremely high. Baboons are very high and highly aggressive, and I think Gugway just kind of took that to the extreme. Paradolitopithecus was an opportunistic hunter, was also an ambush predator, and we see that in the Gugway. Faced focus attacks, just like a baboon. And the Paradolitopithecus might likely had primate-like calls, and the Gugway is known for deep roars, screams, and intimidation displays. But both of them are comparably high intelligence. Paradolitopithecus was very high intelligent for old world monkeys, and the Gugway would be comparable to some humans, I would think. Maybe not as robust as us when it comes to building technology, but certainly problem-solving intelligence. And then we look at some of this is a skeleton of a baboon. There we go. There's your Dinopithecus, Robbie.
Mm-hmm.
So we look at the evolutionary pressure. Predators mostly in Paradolitopithecus early hominins and big cats. But then when it moved over into North America, we're talking dire wolves, short-faced bears, and humans. So the prey pressure became much harder. So they had to adapt to survive. In Eurasia, Paradolichopithecus had to deal with small mammals and plants. But in North America, there were deer, hogs, small game, and lots of opportunistic predation. In Eurasia, it had other primates as competition, but when they start turning into Gugway, we're seeing much bigger apex predators. They're both cold climate. The Paradolichopithecus was adapted to the Ice Age. It was a cold weather primate. They lived in open woodlands so they could run quicker, whereas the Gugway, they live in dense forests and they are capable of a lot of speed, very stealthy. These things would have had to have learned to be quiet. Habitats are very, very similar. Eurasian plains and woodlands compared to North American deep forests. They're both prime real estate for predators. Climate was mild to cool, but they're cold adapted. They moved into the Pleistocene. They survived the Pleistocene and the Ice Age. The Paradolichopithecus was quadrupedal with some bipedal movement, but the Gugway primarily bipedal, silent and fast. But you can see the direct change how that would have adapted. Look at the diets: omnivorous with predatory specialization, and where they fill in their ecological niche. Paradolichopithecus would have just been a mid-tier predator, but the forces that went to work on it during the Ice Age pushed that thing to become a much bigger apex predator. Then we look at the morphology. The baboon-like muzzle that gives way to a larger, more robust predatory muzzle. Canines were pronounced, but in a Gugway, they're massive, made for ripping flesh from bone, ripping faces from skulls. Same thing on both. They had forward-facing predatory eyes. Postures was semi-upright, fully upright, hunched predator stance, and I've heard reports of Gugway dropping to all fours. Hands, they both had hands, but the Gugway would have to be larger and much more powerful, tool capable. I mean, any primate can use tools, but a primate that big would use them well. And then we come back to this, and a paleontologist representation of Paradolichopithecus, and when you look at this, even though you're looking at like a stub of a tail, when you look at this, I would immediately think. In fact, I did the first time I saw this. I immediately thought that's a drawing of a Gugway, and when I read the caption, I'm like, Paradolichopithecus. Geez, I think we're really on to something here. And here's another Paradolichopithecus with its young. Then we look at the physical size and build. Paradolichopithecus was already pretty good sized, but the Gugway would make it bigger. Looking at the weight comparisons, the build, lean terrestrial monkey versus massive cold adapted primate predator. These things, when you look at the proportions and the scales and the way they're built, it's almost like just a direct dotted line straight to the modern Gugway. Robbie, comments? Anything?
Well, I kind of thought about this earlier and wasn't a place to say it, but going back to the movie that we were talking about, minus, yeah, obviously it used tools and weapons, used bows and arrows, knives, things like that. Used tree bark to cover itself to make armor and adaptive camouflage, which was great. But think about some of the attacks. They had that thing going for several of the guys' faces.
Yeah. Yeah, that one old dude, it reached over the log and grabbed him by the face and hauled him up over it.
That's the one where it bottom of the mouth, top of the mouth. But it also went for the eyes on another guy, remember?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know they use the Oma as their base. That's what they call it in the movie. But it makes you wonder.
Well, they called it the Oma, but it's really Oma was always described as a type of Bigfoot. That
Right.
was
That's what
certainly was more.
I
of a
know
Gugway.
that's what I'm saying. They called it that. Pattern it after that because none of the behavior in that movie was typical Bigfoot behavior from what you,
Right.
other than maybe something like a Genosqua or something like that, which who knows, a Genosqua could be a bigger version of a Gugway. Who knows?
Very possible.
Could be the up armored Gugway.
That's a terrifying thought. Gugway are terrifying enough on their own.
The tactical assault Gugway.
Yeah. So now that we've looked at how a proto-baboon could evolve into the predator people still report today, it's time to compare the behaviors. Because when you line up the instincts of Paradylopithecus with the modern Gugway, the match is closer than most people realize. In the next segment, we're going to break down the behavioral alignment, and it's one of the most unsettling parts of this entire theory. Robbie?
So behavioral match, the disturbing alignment. When you study animals long enough, you start to see patterns. Predators move in certain ways. Prey animals move in certain ways. Territorial species have their own rhythm, their own rules, their own lines in the sand. And primates, especially old world monkeys, have a behavioral signature that's hard to miss once you've seen it. What's unsettling about the Gugway is how closely its behavior lines up with a very specific kind of primate aggression. Not ape aggression, not hominid aggression, old world monkey aggression scaled up to something that shouldn't exist in North America. Let's start with the most obvious trait, face-focused attacks. In the animal kingdom, most predators go for the throat or the belly. They want a quick kill. They want to disable their prey fast. But baboons, galatas, is that how you pronounce that?
I think so.
Mandrills, they go for the face. They rip, they tear, they blind, they disfigure. It's not just violence, it's dominance. It's psychological warfare. It's a way of saying, I own this territory and I will destroy anything that challenges me. Now, listen to the Gugway encounters. Not the sensationalized ones, not the campfire stories, the real ones, the ones told by hunters, rangers, and people who don't want attention. What do they describe? A creature that charges without warning, a creature that goes straight for the head, a creature that doesn't bluff, a creature that doesn't posture, a creature that attacks the way a baboon does, but with the size and strength of something far more dangerous.
Hey, Robbie.
Yeah.
This is a modern day galata.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Fabio the baboon.
Yeah, they got a big old mane on them, but look how far, the way their lip curls. That's just like a Primal Rage.
Yeah.
Look at the size of those freaking teeth.
Yeah,
I can see how that one of those could easily rip a person apart. And they're not as big as a human. They're baboon sized. Something like that could do a heck of a lot of damage, and it ain't Gugway sized at all.
Well, let's address that when we say baboon sized. A normal sized baboon would demolish somebody like Hathor Bjornsson.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Without even thinking about it. So put that in perspective. If something baboon could do that to one of the world's strongest men, what could something the size of a Gugway do?
Right.
So,
John, when you look at that thing, yeah, it's pretty terrifying, and that exists in modern animal kingdom. So it makes you think that maybe a Gugway is not such a big leap of the imagination after all.
Brian wants to know where those are found. I'm assuming somewhere in Africa.
Africa. Plains of Africa, the savannas. They're called galatas, Geladas.
So, what we've talked about is not Sasquatch behavior, it's not bear behavior, it's not wolf behavior. It's predatory primate behavior. So now let's talk about territoriality. Sasquatch, for the most part, avoid conflict. They warn, throw rocks, vocalize, tries to scare you off without getting close, for the most part. Gugway doesn't do that. People describe it pacing the tree line, shadowing them through the timber, circling campsites, standing just far enough back that you can't see it clearly, but close enough that you can feel it watching you. That's classic primate territorial behavior. Not defensive, offensive. That brings to mind a lot of the charges that people have had with mountain gorillas and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
but scaled up. So it's the same behavior you see in baboons when they're protecting a troop. Same behavior you see in the galatas when a rival male gets too close. The same behavior you see in mandrills when they're asserting dominance. And if I'm not mistaken, aren't mandrills a little bit more aggressive than baboons?
Yeah, mandrills are very aggressive.
Like I just said earlier, now scale that behavior up to a creature that stands 7 or 8 feet tall and weighs several hundred pounds, or like 700 to 800 pounds. That's a Gugway.
Maybe even bigger than that.
Yeah, that's just an estimate. Now let's talk about the ambush tactics. Most primates aren't ambush hunters or ambush predators, but old world monkeys, they can be. Baboons will hide in brush and wait for prey. They'll stalk, they'll flank, they'll use terrain to their advantage. When they strike fast. Now look at Gugway encounters. People describe being shadowed silently, doing nothing until the creature is close, feeling watched before anything, sudden changes from the mind, a sense of intelligence behind the movement. That's not random. That's not instinct alone. That's strategy. And strategy, that's a primate specialty. This is one of the most consistent and most disturbing traits in the Gugway encounters. People don't hear it move. They don't hear it breathe. They don't hear it until it shifts its weight. It's just there. Predators that rely on ambush evolve for silence. Cats do it. Owls do it. Some primates do it. But a primate that hunts in a dense forest, a primate that relies on stealth to survive, a primate that has to avoid wolves, bears, and humans, that primate has to become a ghost. And that's exactly how people describe the Gugway. Let's talk about the intimidation displays. Old world monkeys have some of the most dramatic intimidation behaviors in the animal kingdom. They bare their teeth, they scream, they charge, they shake branches, they make themselves look bigger. The Gugway doesn't need those theatrics, though. Its size does the talking, its presence does the talking, and its silence does the talking. Witnesses describe creatures that stand still and watch. A creature that doesn't need to roar or scream. A creature that lets you feel the threat instead of hearing it. That's not ape behavior, and that's not hominid behavior. That's something older, something colder, something shaped by survival, not communication. Now let's move on to the group behavior. Most Gugway encounters involve a single creature. But there are reports, quiet ones, rare ones, of multiple individuals moving together. Not in a troop, not in a family-sized group, more like a hunting pair, a coordinated movement. Old world monkeys do this. They flank, they coordinate, they communicate with subtle cues. And when you combine that with the intelligence of a primate and the size of an Ice Age survivor, you get a creature that can outthink you as easily as it can outrun you. When you line up all these behaviors, the face attacks, the territoriality, the ambush tactics, the silence, the intimidation, the group coordination, you get a behavioral profile that matches one thing: a scaled up, cold adapted, old world monkey. Not a hominid, not an ape, not a bear, a primate predator. And that's why this theory is so compelling, because the behavior of the Gugway doesn't match anything else in North America, but it matches the little Dinopithecus and its relatives almost perfectly. So that has slid that one right on in. This isn't a creature acting out of instinct alone. It's acting out of lineage, out of evolution, out of behavioral blueprint that goes back millions of years. And that blueprint didn't disappear. It adapted. It survived. It evolved into something that still walks the deep timber today. So, what the face-focused aggression? Why is that a primate trait? And why is it so rare in North American animals?
Well, North American animals, for by and large, don't have hands.
Very good point.
I would say they go for the face with their teeth, so they can immobilize the body with their hands.
Well, and here's the thing: if you attack a person, an animal, whatever it is, and you go after an arm or foreleg or something like that, generally that entity can still fight, right?
Yeah.
But if you go after the face, the eyes, tell me that doesn't take the fight right out of anything. Because what is your natural instinct if something hits you in the eye?
Cover, try to protect your eyes.
Exactly.
And if you can't see, fighting is going to be real difficult.
Man can't see, you can't fight.
Was it you can't see, you can't fight, can't stand, you can't fight, you can't breathe, you can't fight.
Mr. Silva. Figured you'd get that.
Of course. But look at the territorial behavior, and we still see this in baboons today. The way they pace people, or they pace their prey, they shadow it, silent observation, and then they use ambush tactics. And primates still use this today. Baboons, mandrills, those galatas, they all use the terrain and stay quiet until they're ready to attack. So, we've heard of intimidation displays from Bigfoot, but what do you think the difference is between the intimidation display between a Bigfoot and a Gugway?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it's like what we talked about. Most of the intimidation displays from Bigfoot are, throwing rocks, screaming, whoops, the hollers, things
Beating
like
on
that.
trees or tongue pops, which if you prefer, which I do.
Yeah. But, and, I know Greg's had a couple of, at least a couple that I know of, probably more bluff charges. But that's for there again, just I'm not an expert. That's predominantly what I hear when people talk about, Bigfoot running them out of a place. It's, they got hollered at, they got yelled at, they got stuff thrown at them, trees were broke down, or they were shaking trees, and things like that. But you look at some of these accounts we've had, people talk about Gugways, a lot of it's like they were actually not bluff charged. They were charged to the point where they were like, they just turned around and ran out, like people leaving hunting stands and leaving other personal items in the woods. Just, I don't need that. I'm gone.
Minxie, you've got a very good point. Robbie, we were talking about that not too long ago. When the lady's chimp attacked her, what did it do? It bit off her fingers and chewed off her face.
Oh, that's happened God knows how many times. There was a older couple that used to rescue chimps. I can't remember where they were out of, but they had rescued one from I want to say it was a circus or something like that, and they had it for like 2 or 3 years. And one day the thing just snapped, and it scalped the guy. I mean, literally old school pulled his hair and scalp off the top of his head. And
chimps are incredibly strong.
Yeah. It degloved his head.
And they can do that quite easily.
Yeah.
And again, it went for the head.
Mm-hmm. And I want to say, I know he died, and I want to say it killed the wife too, or it maimed her really bad, but it went after her face too.
I've heard several stories about chimps doing that. And we still got quite a bit of material to cover, folks. So we're going to be taking a break here in just a couple of minutes. But before we do, we're going to keep talking about this a little bit more. But I think basically with this last segment, we've painted a picture of a Gugway that's using modernized tactics that are still being used by the baboons today. I think it clearly shows a genetic link. Because how do those things learn? Not just from being taught by their parents, but they say that animals have a genetic memory, and we do as well. That's why the uncanny valley exists.
Yep.
So, jaw structure, the way the eyes face, the way that, and if you even look at the articulation of the hands with the claws on the feet, that lines up far more with a Paradolipithecus than it does with any other type of monkey. I mean, it's not a chimp. Chimps don't have claws. Chimps don't. They have good size canines, but not pronounced like a baboon's. To me, it just shows a much more palpable link to Paradolipithecus, because they've got so many shared characteristics with modern baboons, mandrills, and galatas. Mixie says there's a chimp got loose in a zoo. It was found walking hand in hand with a small kid. Keepers almost dropped dead. And some chimps are very protective of people, but it doesn't take but that one bad day for it to snap. And when they snap, the chimps are used to being able to fight with other chimps. They don't do as much damage to other chimps as they do to a human. A chimp, even rough playing, can break bone. Wendell, we're glad to hear it, man. I'm glad you're doing better. We've been praying for you. He said, I'm better and finally got home a few minutes ago. Now, dude, I'm glad you're home, man. That's awesome. Well, when we looked at that picture of the galatas, notice the mouth structure. Those things, that's not meant for just intimidation. That's meant for biting something and tearing meat off.
Mm.
Teeth that big, they're not just for display. It's like a freaking saber-toothed monkey.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are at the point where we got to take another quick break, and then we'll jump right back into things. Folks, this would be a great time to top off your coffee, walk the dog, check the dryer, grab a couple cookies from the kitchen, whatever you need to do, but we will be back in just a few minutes as we pop out for a moment to pay the bills, as Race likes to say. So we will be right back.
Hey everybody, this is Kerry Davis from Dark Angel Medical, and you are listening to DA Ex Machina with DARoberts. You may recognize me or some of my products from Dark Angel Medical in some of the Apex Predator, Lakeview Man, and Wild Hunt books, and you can get those products at www.darkangelmedical.com, along with training classes on how to use those products and save a life. Shoot us an email at info@darkangelmedical.com and be the difference.
In a world where monsters still walk the earth, one author dares to face them. From the brutal cryptid horror of the Apex Predator series to the Ozark legends that stalk the night in Lakeview Man, from the elite warriors of codename Wild Hunt to the relentless investigations of the Nightmare Hunter and the frontier terror of Dark Frontiers. When the Dead Rise, the Ragnarok Rising saga unleashes pure zombie apocalypse fury. And across the stars, war rages in the Lost Legion and Man's Marauders. And in the realm of myth and steel, the world of Vanguard calls to those born for legend. Cryptids, zombies, sci-fi warfare, epic fantasy. This is the universe of DARoberts. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com. 2026 is off to a great start, and it's almost time. With many exciting predictions and the recent emphasis on a potential major planetary event occurring in April, it promises to be a super transformational month. And we couldn't be more excited to be in Hawaii during this shift to integrate new frequencies. Folks, this will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. April the 20th through the 24th, 2026. Join us in Kona, Hawaii for Journey to Truth's very first vacation conference retreat. Enjoy 9 presenters over 5 days with ocean adventures with dolphins and whales and sacred sites and so much more. Experience Hawaii like never before. You will enjoy 5 days on the Big Island, so don't wait. Start planning your trip today at journeytotruth.online. That's journeytotruth.online. The paranormal field is changing, and now, more than ever, it's time for professionals to lead the way. Join the Oz Professional Paranormal Investigators Association, a global network of serious investigators dedicated to raising the standard of real paranormal research. Access professional certifications, advanced training, and courses exploring true investigation, psychic phenomena. If you're a real paranormal investigator, be a part of the group defining the future. Join today. Visit ozinstitute.org. That's ozinstitute.org.
And we are back, folks. Thank you guys for hanging out with us while we paid the proverbial bills and took a quick commercial break for the folks on iHeartRadio. Robbie, you want to lead us into the next segment?
Now that we've broken down the behavioral alignment and seen just how closely the Gugway matches a predatory primate lineage, it's time to look at the modern encounters, because these stories people tell today don't just echo the past, they confirm it. In segment 6, we're going to examine the sightings, the patterns, and the moments that reveal Sorry, phone went black on me. We're going to examine the sightings, the patterns, and the moment that reveal exactly what kind of creature we're dealing with.
Modern encounters and evidence of a surviving lineage. If everything we've talked about so far tonight was just a theory, fossils, migration routes, evolutionary pressure, it would still be compelling. But what makes this lineage impossible to ignore are the modern encounters. The stories that our people are telling today. The things they've seen in the timber. The moments that stay with them for the rest of their lives. And these aren't stories from people who are looking for attention. We're talking stories from hunters, ranchers, loggers, park workers, people who know the woods, who know the animals, and who know the difference between a bear and something that shouldn't exist. When they talk about the Gugway, they don't hesitate. They don't waffle. They don't say maybe. They say, I know what I saw. And what they describe lines up almost perfectly with the creature we've been tracing from the fossil records. So let's start with one of the most consistent patterns, the in the tree line shadowing. People describe walking through the woods and feeling watched, not in a vague, spooky way, but in a very real, very physical way. The hair on the back of their neck stands up, the air feels heavy, the forest goes quiet, and then they see movement. Not a shape, not a silhouette, just movement. Something pacing them, staying just inside the tree line that's matching their speed, but keeping the distance steady. That's not bear behavior. That's not wolf behavior. And that's not typical Sasquatch behavior. That's primate behavior, specifically territorial primate behavior. Now let's talk about the charges. This is where the Gugway separates itself from every other cryptid in North America. Sasquatch will bluff. It'll warn you. It'll throw rocks. It'll vocalize. Gugway doesn't do that. It doesn't warn. It just comes at you. People describe a sudden explosion of movement from the brush, a blur of muscle and teeth, a sound like something ripping through the world, and then, just as suddenly, it stops. Not because it's afraid, but because it made its point. That's exactly how baboons behave when they're defending territory. They don't bluff, they don't posture, they attack, and then stop once the threat retreats. Now let's talk about the face. This is the detail that shows up again and again from the Beast of Seven Shoots all the way to other encounters from like down in East Texas. There's dozens of documented Gugway sightings, but the Beast of Seven Shoots pops immediately to mind. This is the detail that shows up again and again, no matter the region, no matter the witness. The long muzzle, the forward-facing eyes, a mouth that's built for tearing flesh, a face that looks like a baboon scaled up to nightmare proportions. People don't describe a flat human-like face. They don't describe an ape. They describe something that looks like it stepped out of the Pleistocene. And that's exactly what we would expect from a descendant of Paradolipithecus. Now let's talk about the silence. This is one of the most chilling parts of the modern encounters. People don't hear it move. They don't hear it breathe. And they don't hear it shift its weight. It's just suddenly there. A creature that size shouldn't be that quiet. But a primate predator that evolved for ambush, a creature that survived by avoiding wolves, bears, and humans, a creature that learned to move like a ghost, that creature would be dead silent. And that's exactly what people describe. Now let's talk about the intelligence. This is the part that makes even seasoned hunters uneasy. People describe the Gugway watching them, not just staring blankly, watching them, tracking their movements, studying them, choosing when to reveal itself and when to vanish like smoke. That's not instinct. That's not animal panic. That's intelligence. And intelligence is a primate signature. Now let's talk about the kills. There were reports, quiet ones, the kind that don't make it into newspapers, of livestock found with their faces torn apart. Not eaten, torn apart. We've talked about a lot of those reports on this show. That's not wolf behavior. That's not bear behavior, and that's not cougar behavior. That's primate aggression. That's dominance behavior. That's the same pattern we see with baboons when they kill rivals or threats. Now let's talk about regional consistency. These encounters aren't isolated. They're not confined to one state or one forest. They show up across the continent, from Appalachia to the Ozarks to the Pacific Northwest to the Rockies to northern Minnesota to even the deep south and deep in the Canadian wilderness. Different regions, different witnesses, but the same creature, the same face, the same behavior, the same silence, and the same aggression. That's not a coincidence. That's not a misidentification. That's evidence of a species. And when you line up these modern encounters with the evolutionary path we've been talking about, from Paradolipithecus to a cold-adapted primate predator, the picture becomes hard to ignore. It's not a myth. It's not just a monster. It's a lineage. A creature that crossed the Bering Strait land bridge, a creature that survived the Ice Age, a creature that adapted to the forests of North America, and a creature that still walks the deep timber today. And the people who've seen it aren't imagining things. They're seeing the last surviving branch of a forgotten primate family. So, Robbie, that's when we talk about Gugway, that's one thing we can say that proves it's a Gugway sighting is the consistency of the description of especially the face.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but a lot of the things that we've been saying tonight are things that just keep showing up again and again. I don't think it's repetitive. I think it just goes to to strengthen what we've been talking about. It's stuff that's been noted in the fossil record. It's stuff that keeps going and goes on into these modern sightings that we've talked about.
Well, look at the Beast of Seven Shoots. That image of the beast of seven shoots, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's got to pronounce snout like a baboon, not like a normal Bigfoot encounter.
Yeah. Oh, and I don't know if you saw it, but they just put out, me, you, and Luca made the top 7 or the top 10 in the Cryptid Quarterly, top 10 all of the year. Luca was first, you were 4th, and I was 7th.
Nice. That's awesome.
So I didn't know if you saw it. So I want to make sure you.
I hadn't seen it. Miss Lay, can you send me the link on that? I'd like to check that out.
But like I said, I don't think it's redundant. I think it just strengthens what we've been talking about. The perfect example, the beast of seven shoots. I believe that 100% that was a Gugway. You and I and Doc have done several deep dives on, not on the show per se, but just 3 of us talking. And I did a show with Jessica about it, and I 100% believe it was a Gugway.
Well, someone just mentioned the livestock kills in Ohio. It's not just around there with it. We've had livestock kills that they attacked the face and left the rest of it, killed it and then just left it. No feeding, just animal mangling. That's happened in Wyoming. That's happened in Montana. That's happened down in New Mexico to cattle. It's happened everywhere, and it's one that's left people confused because, again, it's not normal predation. It's something simply attacking its face and killing it. And when we talked about Gugway versus Paradolipithecus, you could see the intelligence, you could see the behaviors. It's clear that they've got a connected lineage somewhere. I'm not saying that Paradolipithecus is Gugway, but to me it looks very much like Paradolipithecus could be the ancestor that explains why Gugway's here. Lone Queen says beasts of seven shoots also seem to have coloration that is often present in primates like baboons, especially the males. Yes, it did.
Yep.
It so certainly did.
Did you see what Rodney said?
It sounds like if you do come in contact with one, you just might have to shoot your way out. Yeah. Robbie and I were just discussing that very thing before the show. We were discussing new calibers, and I think I'm going to be upgrading a couple of things here in the near future. But that's not what we're here talking about anyway. So if the modern counters match the evolutionary profile this closely, what does the full picture look like when we put it all together? And now that we've looked at the modern encounters, the sightings and the behavior and the patterns, it's time to bring everything together. So in the next segment, we're going to lay out the unified theory, the lineage, the evolution, the behavior, and the sightings. All of it. And when you see the full picture, the Gugway stops looking like a mystery and starts looking like a survivor. Robbie, you want to take the next one?
The unified theory, the little Dinopithecus lineage. When you step back and look at everything we've covered tonight, the fossil record, the migration routes, the evolutionary pressures, the behavior, the modern encounters, a picture starts to form. Not a blurry outline, not a maybe, a picture with weight, a picture with structure, and a picture that feels less like speculation and more like recognition. This is where the theory stops being a theory and starts becoming a lineage. Let's walk through it piece by piece. We start with the little Dinopithecus, a ground-dwelling old-world monkey living in Eurasia during the Pleistocene. A primate with a long muzzle, forward-facing eyes, and a skull built for power. A primate that didn't live in the trees, didn't rely on agility, and didn't behave like the monkeys we're familiar with today. This was a creature shaped by the cold climates and surrounded by predators. It had to be fast, it had to be aggressive, and it had to be smart. Then we look at the world it lived in, a world where megafauna herds moved across continents, where predators followed them, and where the land bridge of the Bering Strait wasn't a barrier but a gateway. A world where cold adapted species moved freely between Eurasia and North America. If the little Dinopithecus reached the northern edges of Siberia, I'm gonna break you before it's over with that, and the fossil record suggests that it did, then the leap to the Bering Straits isn't that much of a stretch. As we said before, it's a straight line. Now imagine a small population making that crossing, not thousands, not even hundreds, just enough to establish a foothold. Once they reach North America, the real transformation would begin. This continent wasn't gentle, wasn't brutal. Short-faced bears, dire wolves, smilodons, human hunters, competition was everywhere. We've said that over and over tonight. So a primate that wanted to survive here would have to change. It'd have to adapt because it had to grow. It had to become something more formidable than what it was. And that's exactly what the evolutionary pressures would produce. A larger body because cold climates favor size, a more upright posture because upright movement offers advantages in combat and visibility, stronger muzzle because predatory behavior demands power, larger canines because dominance and survival depended on them, a silent gait because ambush predators don't survive by being loud, territorial aggression because defending resources was life or death, intelligence because primates don't survive by instinct alone. Every one of these traits shows up in the modern Gugway encounters. Not some of them, not most of them, all of them. The muzzle, the size, the silence, the aggression, territorial behavior, face-focused attacks, the intelligence, ambush tactics, tree line shadowing, sudden charges, the waiting, and the watching. This isn't a random collection of traits. It's a behavioral blueprint. The same blueprint we see in the old world monkeys scaled up and shaped or sharpened by the Ice Age. Now let's talk about the sightings. Different regions and different witnesses, all through different decades. Same creature, same face, same posture, same behavior. That's not a coincidence, and it's not misidentification. It's not folklore. That's a species that fits perfectly into the evolutionary path we traced. A species that behaves exactly like a cold-adapted primate predator. A species that looks like the descendant of the little Dinopithecus. And here's the part that ties it all together. The Gugway doesn't have to behave like a relic hominid. It doesn't have to behave like an ape. It doesn't have to behave like a bear. It behaves like a primate that evolved alongside predators, not above them. A primate that learned to survive by being meaner, faster, and smarter than everything around it. A primate that didn't rely on tools or fire or language. A primate that relied on instinct, intelligence, and aggression. That's not a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot or a hominid. That's a primate predator. And when you put all these pieces together, the fossils, the migration, the evolution, the behavior, the sightings, the Gugway stops looking like a mystery and starts looking like a survivor. A creature that crossed continents, a creature that survived the Ice Age, a creature that adapted to the forests of North America, a creature that still walks the deep timber today. Not a myth, not a monster, but a lineage. The last surviving branch of a forgotten primate family. And if that's true, if this creature is real, if it's out there, if it has been there since the Pleistocene, then we're not dealing with a cryptid. We're dealing with a relic species, a living fossil, a predator older than our oldest stories, and that changes everything.
Absolutely. And it's all laid out right there. The fossils, the migration patterns, the evolution, the behavior, which is still spot on, and the sightings, the descriptions. That all converges for a perfect explanation of the lineage of a Gugway. And I think this is why this theory is stronger than just a hominid explanation, because the behavior doesn't match a hominid, the morphology doesn't match a hominid, and the aggression certainly doesn't match a hominid. We're talking about something that acts more like a baboon than an ape. Bigfoot's behavior is a lot like an ape, but a Gugway more like a mandrill or a what was those galatas or baboons. They're hyper aggressive, they're hyper territorial, and the face morphology matches. So when we look at the possibility of a relic species, we know other Ice Age creatures have survived. Bears did it. Bears survived the Ice Age. There are a lot of animals that came through the Ice Age. Wolves survived the Ice Age. Some lineages are still around today that survived the Ice Age. So why couldn't this survive? The implications for the ecology, for human safety, for conservation, scientific discovery, these all are factors that would have to be brought in, because I do believe the government knows about these things. And I think they've known about them for a long time. And they weigh our safety against the habitat that these things occupy. The conservation efforts that would have to go in if they had to admit that those things were there. It would be the scientific discovery of a lifetime, but at the same time, science, especially modern science, is extremely resistant to change, and they don't want to be proven wrong, and this would do exactly that.
Yep. So, we've laid out all the unified theory, the lineage, the evolution, the behavior, the sightings. It's time to talk about what all that means, because if the Gugway is a surviving Ice Age primate, then we're sharing the woods with a predator older than our oldest stories. In the next segment, we're going to look at the implications, the risks, the mysteries, and the questions that still keep researchers up at night. DA, you want to take us away?
Absolutely. Final thoughts. What survives in the dark timber? When you spend enough time studying the unknown like we do, we study this stuff all the time. We're always looking up new source material. We're exploring sighting reports, search and rescue logs. We're always digging into this subject. But when you spend enough time studying it, you start to realize something. The world isn't as neat and tidy as we pretend it is. We like clean categories. We like neat explanations. We like to believe that everything dangerous is already known, cataloged, and pinned to a page in some field guide. But the woods don't care about our categories. The deep timber doesn't give a crap about our assumptions. And evolution doesn't stop simply because we stop paying attention. If the Gugway is what the evidence suggests, a surviving Ice Age primate, then we're not dealing with any kind of myth. We're not dealing with some old monster. We're dealing with a species that's been here longer than our oldest stories. A species that survived the Pleistocene, survived the megafauna die-off, survived the arrival of humans, and survived every attempt the world has made to erase it. And it would certainly contribute to the uncanny valley theory. That alone should make us rethink everything we believe about the North American wilderness. And let's talk about what that means. First, it means the forests aren't empty. We already know that. We like to imagine that we've mapped every inch of this continent. We haven't. Not even close. There are stretches of forest in the Pacific Northwest, in the Rockies, in the Appalachians, in the Canadian woodlands, heck, even here in the Mark Twain National Forest in Missouri. There are sections where you could walk for days without seeing another human being. Places where the trees swallow sound. Places where the canopy blocks out the sky. Places where the only law is survival. If a creature like the Gugway exists, and the evidence points that way, then there are places it calls home. Second, it means we're sharing the woods with a predator older than our species. Think about that for a minute. Humans didn't invent fear. We inherited it. And again, that's the uncanny valley theory. We learned it from creatures like this. Predators that hunted in the dark. Predators that moved silently. Predators that watched from the tree line and waited for the right moment to strike. The Gugway isn't just a relic. It's a reminder. A reminder that we're not the apex predator everywhere we go. Anybody that's spent any time in the deep woods can tell you that. You get out away from basic civilization in 911, you realize pretty fast you are not the top of the food chain. And it's a reminder that the world was dangerous long before we got here. And a reminder that some lineages don't die. They adapt. Finally, it means the creature is intelligent. Not human intelligent, not tool using, not language building, but primate intelligence. Strategic, observant, capable of learning, and certainly capable of remembering. That's the kind of intelligence that makes a creature dangerous in ways we don't expect. It's the kind of intelligence that lets it avoid humans when it wants to and confront them when it chooses to. It means the creature is rare. If the Gugway were common, we'd have bodies, we'd have bones, we'd have clear photographs. Honestly, I think we probably do have bones and bodies, but they probably vanished into the Smithsonian. I don't think we'll ever know all the full extent of what the Smithsonian's have collected over the last couple hundred years. But rarity doesn't mean absence. Rarity means survival. A species that learned to avoid humans thousands of years ago isn't going to suddenly start posing for trail cameras. It's going to stay in the shadows, it's going to move at night, and it's going to watch us from the places where we don't look. It means the creature has a niche. Every species that survives does so because it fills a role in the ecosystem. The Gugway role appears to be territorial apex predator, also as a scavenger. It's an opportunistic hunter, and it regulates populations. That's not a creature that wanders aimlessly. That's a creature with purpose. It means it's dangerous. We're not talking Sasquatch. It's not a gentle giant. It's not some curious hominid. This is a primate predator, a creature that evolved to fight wolves and bears, a creature that doesn't bluff, a creature that doesn't hesitate, and a creature that goes for the face. If we're to believe that Gugway is real, and I do, and the evidence is stacking up, folks, then people need to understand what they're dealing with. Not panic, not to sensationalize, but to respect the reality of the wilderness. Because it means the story isn't over. We're not looking at a closed chapter. We're looking at a living lineage, a creature that survived the Ice Age and kept going, a creature that adapted to every challenge the world threw at it, a creature that still walks the deep timber today. And that raises questions. Big ones. How many are there? Where do they live? What do they eat? How do they communicate? How do they avoid us so effectively? And what happens when their territory overlaps with ours? These are questions science hasn't asked yet, but it should. Because if the Gugway is a surviving Ice Age primate, then we're not dealing with folklore. We're dealing with biology. We're dealing with ecology. We're dealing with a species that deserves to be understood and respected. And maybe, just maybe, we're dealing with a creature that's been watching us for a very long time. Like, when we talk about the creature that survived the Ice Age, we've got plenty of examples in the modern animal kingdom of animals that did just that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not those specific types, but I mean, bears survived, wolves survived,
Humans survived.
Humans survived. I mean, elephants came from mammoths, so those are just case in point that shows that things adapt and change over time.
And here's something we talked about more than once on the show, and I'm going to bring it up again. The misconception that there's not enough territory for something like this to survive. When we started talking about how many acres were set aside just for national parks, the number was what, 88.5 million, something like that?
I think
and
we
then
just
we
say 88 million.
Yeah, like 88 million acres were set aside for national parks. 88 million acres. Okay. There's way more than that in the state of Alaska alone, but we'll get to that in a second. When we took that 88 million acres, we started adding state parks, wildlife management areas, game preserves, reservation land, Bureau of Land Management land. And when we added all of that up, land that is completely undeveloped and not allowed to be touched by developers or for people to own privately, we're talking land that is secured by state and local governments, it added up to over a billion, that's billion with a B, billion acres of land that is still pristine and untouched across North America. Now, if you listen to the news, they make it sound like that there's highways through every port, nook and cranny of the United States, and there's no wilderness left. But that's a load of hogwash. And I can tell you right now, Greg House, who's in the chat, I guarantee you go down to Greg's place, he can take you to some places in the backwoods of Georgia where you wouldn't find your way out again, not without a lot of help. I could take you to places in the Mark Twain with the same thing. You could walk for days without crossing a road. Robbie could take you places up in the Appalachians where, well, I guarantee you're not going to find your way out. The place where he trained, where he learned to track, that alone right there was that Pisgah National Forest. That national forest alone is big enough to swallow up a whole civilization. That thing is massive. And here in Missouri, when you add up the Mark Twain and the Ozark National Forest together, those are the two big forests here in the Ozarks, they add up to almost 5 million acres. Now, when we talk about Alaska, I want to throw this back in. If you were able, and we've mentioned this before, and I'm going to cover it again, we mentioned this before, if you could walk and explore 1 square mile of land, and that's a lot of land on foot, but if you could physically explore 1 square mile of land in Alaska, it would still take you 125 years to explore all of it. And that's just Alaska.
That's 1 square mile a day.
That's 1 square mile a day without stopping. Would take you 125 years to see all of it. And folks that think that there's not enough wilderness out there to support this kind of stuff, they're deluding themselves, because there are tons and tons of places where things like this could hide. Those hundreds of thousands of acres in the big thicket of Texas. There's I think it's 250 or 200,000 acres in LBL alone.
Yeah.
I think it's right around 200,000.
Yeah.
My point is, there is plenty of habitat to support big predators like this.
The Jersey pine barrens themselves are 1 million acres. We've talked about that. When people think of New Jersey, they think about cities and Jersey Turnpike, things like that. There's 1 million acres of national forest in New Jersey.
Yeah, Lone Queen's dead on. Says it would help explain the lack of bodies and ease of disappearance. The dying go deep in a cave, and many other creatures will to die. I've been going in and out of the woods my whole life. I have never once seen a bear skeleton. I'm not saying they don't exist. I've just never run across one. I've found plenty of deer, but I've never found a mountain lion or a bear skeleton. Never happened. And I know the people will say, well, this one guy in Minnesota, he found a bear carcass. That's the exception, not the rule. 99.99% of hunters, who even the ones who spend a lot of time in the woods, will never find a predator carcass, because they don't die out in the open unless you shoot one. They tend to go someplace off, hard to find and hard to get to die. Elephants, the elephant graveyard, the mythical elephant graveyard, they will travel miles just to lay down and die. And I think that's like that with most predators. Anybody that's ever owned a cat, cats do that. When cats get to the point where they're going to die, they don't come curl up in your lap and die. They go someplace where they'll be left alone. And the cat's a predator. It is an urban predator, but it's a predator nonetheless. So this, when you couple all of this information with how much land is out there, and the propensity for large predators to do exactly that, to go someplace to die. And we're assuming that if they die as part of a family group, that the family doesn't do something with the body. And I think that's very likely that they do. But even if they were just a solo, they're still going to go someplace very hard to get to, very remote, to lay down and die.
Yep.
So I think we've pretty well covered, the implications of how it could have survived the Ice Age. We've talked about the wilderness misconceptions. We've talked about this thing's behavior, its intelligence, the way it mirrors modern baboons, and the way we're seeing the same behaviors in the Gugway. This to me, one of the greatest things about cryptozoology and learning about these creatures is being able to find some connection like this in the fossil record that gives us a tangible, scientifically backed place to begin to start to understand these creatures. Because in order for us to understand them, we've got to classify them. We've got to figure out where they came from and what made them what they are. We can't, folks, you can't explain a mystery with another mystery. Simply because you can't find something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean it can turn invisible. It doesn't mean it gets beamed up to the Starship Enterprise. It didn't walk through a portal. It's an animal. Like every other thing on this planet, it's a terrestrial animal just like us. We're the highest intelligence primate on the planet. We can't walk through portals. We can't get beamed up to the Enterprise. Maybe not yet, but we can't turn invisible unless you talk about some of the new technology that's starting to emerge. But these things don't want to be found. They're the masters of their area. They're the masters of their territory. They know the woods better than we ever will. And if they don't want to be found, they're not going to be found. And that's something that we can do. I've got a buddy. I've got several friends who are rangers, but I've got a buddy named Mike. Mike was an Army Ranger. And if Mike walks into the woods and he doesn't want to be found, you ain't going to find him. I know. I tried. And that's a guy that learned how to do it in the military. These things were born to it. They were adapted to it. And it's a habit they've had for thousands of years. Staying invisible, ambush predation is what's kept their species alive. So when we start looking at these mysteries, these different cryptid species, and we start looking at possible combinations of things that down through the fossil records that give us at least a glimpse into what could have made this. This is what makes these theories so plausible and so scientifically founded, and what makes them compelling. Because we're not just grasping at straws here. We're pulling things from the actual fossil records that could have huge ramifications for a modern species. It's an argument for a modern relic species. And I think that is really our whole purpose here on this show. Robbie and I and Doc and Steve, we all approach this from a very scientific, very evidence-based point of view, and we do our best to present these theories in such a way that you can look at them and decide for yourself whether or not you think we're full of crap or if you think we're onto something. I personally very strongly feel that we're onto something with the Paradolacopithecus theory. It explains a lot. And the similarities aren't just superficial. The similarities are exact.
Yep. And, like I said, I think we've just kind of added on to things that we've been saying for, 2-3 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more we dig into stuff like this, when we talked about the national parks theory with Teddy Roosevelt, we talked about Paradolacopithecus, we talked about Gigantopithecus and other possible ancestors for Bigfoot. We're looking for real world, tangible scientific links that could explain the presence of these creatures. We're again not grasping at straws, not wishful thinking, not putting in possibilities that just aren't physically present in any other species on the planet. So to me, it makes sense that they've got some sort of terrestrial ancestor. They have to. And in the case of Gugway, I truly believe that it's Paradolacopithecus. Lung Queen says they've done experiments where they put a group of like monkeys or snakes in a relatively small enclosure and had corresponding experts in to find them. They found none. Yeah. Have you ever stepped over a copperhead on a trail in the leaves? Yeah, when it moves and you suddenly feel like you're about to poop your pants, it's because they camouflage perfectly. Robbie, what's the word of the day?
Adaptive camouflage.
It's bing, bing, bing. That's it. That is exactly it. That's why these things can't be found. Not because they turn invisible, not because they're supermen or they come from planet X, because they have adaptive camouflage, and we see it all across the animal community. And for the people that say, what about when their tracks disappear? Well, we've talked about that too. This guy over here is a professional tracker. That's what he does for his department. He tracks fugitives. So when he says that it's very possible that they walk backwards on their tracks, and then he points out how that happened from the pressure ridges and the changes in weight and the weight distribution of the track, when he points that out and people go, no, that's not possible, you are literally ignoring a guy who studied tracking and to find people, to find humans that are running from the law. We're not talking about Jimmy Joe Bob who learned to track deer because he'd shot one when he was a kid. We're talking somebody that was taught to be a manhunter. And the difference is night and day. I used to think I was a pretty good tracker. Why? Because my uncle showed me how to track deer when I was a kid. When I'd shoot a deer, how to follow it. He didn't teach me anything about pressure ridges. He didn't teach me anything about stance. He didn't teach me anything about fresh meat. He didn't teach me anything about dwell time. I didn't know any of that until I met Robbie. I learned more in 20 minutes listening to Robbie than I thought I knew my entire life. And that's a tough pill for me to swallow, because I used to think I was pretty good at it. And I learned I was not. I knew surface level tracking, and that was it. Adaptive camouflage, backtracking on their tracks, and a creature that's perfectly suited to its environment that does not want to be found. That's why we can't find them. That's why they're so hard to find. That's why all we have is some tracks, maybe an occasional piece of fur or scat, and vocalizations. Pictures are going to be tough. If Bigfoot and even Gugway have that clear hair shaft like we suspect, that's going to make them, one, adaptable, like we saw in the Paul Freeman footage when it stopped in front of that tree and just disappeared. Didn't cloak, didn't go through a portal, didn't teleport. Scotty didn't beam it up. It just blended into its surroundings in a heartbeat. Did it right in front of us. And then when it started moving, you could see it perfectly again. However, when it stood still, that adaptive camouflage made it practically invisible. I don't know if I can put it any plainer. It's a scientifically based, factual theory on why these things can vanish in the woods. It doesn't have anything to do with supernatural abilities, time travel, teleportation, anything like that. It is just natural ability. And that's what we present on this show. We look for a natural explanation. And I honestly, truly believe that with Paradylopithecus, we may have found an ancestor of the Gugway. Robbie, what do you think, brother?
I agree. I didn't know anything about the one we talked about tonight. Obviously, I've heard of Dinopithecus, which, like you said, makes sense because it's more like a footnote than it is anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's very, very well lines up with all the sightings and theories and things that we've talked about for the past couple of years.
Yeah. And we're going to continue to build on these theories. From the tongue pop theory to the clear hair shaft theory, to the camouflage, natural adaptive camouflage theories. We're going to continue to build on these because that's how you build a profile of a living creature. Not off hopes and dreams that it's something supernatural. You start to build an actual profile, and that's what we do. That's our job. We gather evidence, we share theories, and if you choose to believe them, that we hope that you do. But these theories are just that. They're theories. And folks, again, I'm going to reiterate this. There are no experts in this field. None. And anybody who claims they are is full of crap. There's a few people out there that claim to be Bigfoot experts or monster experts or what have you. There are no experts in this field. None. So when somebody tries to convince you otherwise, they're selling something. We're not presenting this as absolute fact. We're not trying to claim we know the truth. What we're saying is, we're presenting a plausible scientific description, a plausible scientific explanation, and hopefully one that resonates true with you guys. So hopefully, if you enjoy our content, if you enjoy this kind of stuff, make sure you're sharing this show with people that enjoy this kind of stuff. And if you're looking for answers, not strange and bizarre stories of impossible things, then this is the place for you, because we stick to the scientific truth around here. We stick to evidence collecting just the way we did when we were cops. We approach it like scientists, like Steve with his background in biology and medicine, Doc with his background in medicine. We approach this scientifically, and that's what we're always going to do. So when you strip away the noise, the speculation, the folklore, and the fear, you're left with one simple truth. The world is older and stranger than we really give it credit. The forests we walk in today aren't empty. They're not silent, and they're not tame. They're the last remnants of a world that existed long before we showed up, and some of the things that survived that world didn't survive by accident. If the Gugway is a relic primate, and I truly believe it is, a survivor from the Ice Age, then it's not a ghost story. It's not just a campfire tale. It's a piece of living history that still moves through the deep timber, still hunts, still defends its territory, and still watches us from the shadows. And the more we learn, the more the pieces line up. The fossils, the behavior, the sightings, the silence, the intelligence, the aggression. It all points to a creature that didn't vanish when the mammoths did. It adapted, it endured, and it kept going. And that should remind all of us of something very important. The wilderness isn't ours. We borrow it. We pass through it. And sometimes, if we're paying attention, we catch a glimpse of the things that were here long before us and will be long after we're gone. So if you've enjoyed tonight's deep dive, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Sorry, I got an itchy throat. It helps more than you know. And if you want to support the show directly, consider joining the channel memberships. It keeps the research going, keeps the stories coming, and it helps us shine a light into the dark corners that most people don't want to look into. So thank you all for being part of the Nightmare Hunter Nation. Y'all stay safe out there, stay aware, and then remember, the woods are never as empty as they seem. Robbie, you want to tell us a little bit about some of our affiliates? I got to get a drink before I keep coughing.
You want me to start off with Dark Angels? This little guy ain't here.
Sure.
So, Doc, our illustrious
potentate.
Member of the team, combat medic, flight medic in the Air Force, decided one day that he really wanted to help people, so he started Dark Angel Medical. They make some of the best, or actually, in my opinion and DA's opinion, the best med kits in the business. That's the new limited edition. It's called the Trail. I can't remember what Trail stands for. It's like trauma, something, and life saving. I know the T and the L. Doc and his acronyms. He and I got together on that. He got those. I did the engraving on that limited run he's doing. We packed those up while we were in Kentucky. I believe he's at 212.
I believe it's 212.
212 people are still walking around having birthdays because of Doc's training and his kits. Has everything from your little minor boo-boo kits all the way up to mass casualty. And if you're going to go and do some of the things that we're talking about doing, you need to have one of those. I mean, you can go and get a cheaper kit, but how much is your life worth?
Exactly.
That's what I always say. Doc's kits aren't cheap, but they're worth it, because not many other companies have that kit for life guarantee, which is if you use one of his kits to save a life, your own or somebody else's, you send send back to him what's left, and they'll repack it for free of charge. That kit for life guarantee means something. And
Yeah,
all his
absolutely.
kits are HSA and FSA approved. So if you work for a place that's got those and has funds and needs to use them, you can use it for that. Use code Cryptid20 when you check out, get yourself extra 20% off, and buy a kit, be the difference.
Absolutely.
Help Doc put some more birthdays in some more boxes.
Yep. And our next affiliate is the good folks over at Scallywag Tactical. Let me get the code up there. Scallywag is a fantastic veteran-owned company. They make some of the best blades you're going to get your hands on. And right now they've got a special going on their brand new multi-tool. And I was texting Craig about this earlier today. I've got to get one of those things. It takes multi-tools it's like a Boy Scout knife on steroids. It is so freaking awesome. I've got to get one of those. But anyway, I clicked on the wrong thing. God dang it. Where did that come up?
Miss Roxanne, I didn't do the letter. I just grabbed the Dark Angel medical thing on there. He bought the bags from somewhere. I'm not that good. Trust me.
That didn't come up. Miss Lene, can you put up the Scallywag link? But check out Scallywag. They're a veteran-owned company. Craig's a veteran, I believe, in the Marine Corps. Great dude, just an awesome dude. And you might see him in the Scallywag crew in the newest book, which is Leviathan Down. They make an appearance. Actually, they make a significant appearance. Yeah, they make a significant appearance. But check out Scallywag Tactical. They've got not only they have fantastic blades, but they've got all kinds of other gear, EDC gear, fantastic T-shirts, and they're even talking about the possibility of making the narwhal from Codename Wild Hunt Leviathan Down. Craig's mentioned taking it to the group and seeing if they can actually build the narwhal. So I'm hopeful that that'll come out soon. But check them out at scallywagtactical.com and use discount code DARoberts10 for 10% off your entire order. I'd talk about the Blemish Blades section, but they did away with that. So check them out. And again, scallywagtactical.com, and let them know we sent you. Robbie, you want to talk about our last one? The good folks at Sigwo?
Yep. Sigwo Arms Company, another veteran-owned company in Springfield, not far from DA. They're the only ones licensed to do the Dark Frontiers and Wild Hunt on any custom firearm that you order. And this is pretty much a one-stop shop. They make their own ammo, they make their own guns, they sell guns, they sell cans for said firearms. I mean, pretty much anything, holsters, knives, anything that you need for that, they sell. And they're a good group of guys. Check them out online or go into the shop if you're there. Tell the Codys we sent you. Use code Bigfoot5. Get yourself extra 5% off of your first responder or military. You let them know, and they'll give you an extra 5%, give you a total of 10% off your purchase, and that can add up when you're buying a big item purchase. But like I said, they sell stuff that's there ready to walk out the door and use, or they can custom build something for you. They do a really good job, so go tell the Codys we sent you. Check them out.
Definitely. And last but not least, the ones we like to talk about is all of the authors we have in the group. Robbie's an author, Doc's an author, Luca, who's a good friend of ours, who's been on the show a few times, is an author. We need to get her back, by the way. And I happen to be an author. And you can check out all of our books on Amazon. You can find Luca T. Jacobs' books on Amazon, as well as her website, which is lucatjacobs.com. Or you can find mine on DARoberts.net. But other than that, you can find all of us on Amazon.com in Kindle, print, and for the most part in audio. We're still working on a couple of cases in audio, but it's getting there. So check them all out. If you like cryptid stories, if you like high adventure, high action, action-packed, edge of your seat stories, you're going to like all of them. Robbie's a very prolific author. You've got, 11 or 10 now? About to release 11.
About to release 11.
Luca's got 15 or 16. Doc's about to release his second book. He's the newest of the crew. And I've got 39 in print. Got about ready to finish number 40. So I hope you guys will check them all out. There's plenty of stories to keep you guys going for a good long time. And it's just one big universe, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So folks, I hope you guys will check all of them out. And as we wind it down, the last thing I always want to talk about is the 22 a Day Foundation. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and folks, that's just unacceptable. We need to reach out and embrace our friends and family who've worn a uniform. Let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know you care. And I don't just mean veterans. I mean first responders, active duty, reserves, National Guard, any first responder, be that corrections, law enforcement, dispatch, EMTs, firefighters. These folks that put on uniforms, they see and have to deal with things that most folks will never understand. And it takes its emotional toll, especially in the form of PTSD on a lot of folks. And I can speak from personal experience that is something that is very tough to deal with. Sometimes you need help, and that's what you got. That's what I've got brothers for, him and Doc and Steve, and there's a few other folks I know I can call if I need to talk. But reach out to your friends and family that wear a uniform. Let them know you're thinking about them. Let them know you care, because 22 a day is unacceptable. Let's get 22 a day down to 0 where it needs to be. And as we close out the show, we close her out with a toast. And Robbie, if you don't mind giving us the toast tonight, let me get that pulled up. And I will have that in just a moment. If you don't mind leading us out, we're going to close out the show.
Doesn't matter what you're drinking, but raise a glass with us. This is from the old Irish drinking song, The Parting Glass. It goes like this. But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all. Good night, everybody. Slanja, thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Slanja, bye.
Plains, the winds are howling, saloon doors swinging, shadows growling. 3 lawmen stand tough as rawhide. Yeah, Doc and DA, nothing can abide. Whiskey shots and poker faces, staring down the darkest spaces in this town where legends roam. These boys bring justice, sending evil home. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night. Jed's a howler, claws of steel. Doc's a biter, makes the devil real. But DA's a shifty one, a shape-shifting soul. Can turn to anything, takes any form, takes control. Tonight the chupacabras come to town, sucking the life from all around. But these lawmen, they ain't afraid. They'll face the darkness unafraid. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night. Full moon rises, bat wings flap, the air grows cold, a chill and trap. But these lawmen, they're ready to fight underneath the pale moonlight. Jed and Doc transform with a howl. DA shifts, becomes a night owl. Together they stand, a force so strong against the evil right in the wrong. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night.